We good? Yes. All right. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here this evening. My name is Joseph Tex Dozier. I'm the chair of the District 1 Advisory Board. If you are watching online for the first time or here in person for the first time, the District Advisory Board meets monthly, typically on the first Monday, and is a unique citizen participation instrument for the city of Wichita in that every single district has one of these boards where folks from around the district in different neighborhoods, background, ages can serve on them and give feedback and input to the sitting council members on various issues, as well as give feedback and votes on zoning cases going through the districts as well, which is unique in that you have that grassroots citizen connection to that, in addition to the typical metro planning boards, things like that. If you are here for a zoning case, know that there will be an opportunity to speak to those cases later in the meeting. If you are here to speak about something that's not in the agenda or one of the zoning cases, there will be an opportunity for you to do that later in the agenda as well. We'll first take order of business without objection to approve the agenda for December 4th, 2023. Doing no objection, I will actually then seek to delay approval of the minutes for November because they were late getting out, and we'll review them and approve them and make any corrections at the next meeting unless there's any objections. Hearing none, we're going to move on to city reports, staff reports. First up will be the fire department. They're available online. Okay. So then we will go to police. They're available online.
Officer Stark with the Wichita Police Department's Patrol North Community Policing Unit. Hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. For Thanksgiving, we gave away Thanksgiving meals as part of the Police Department Union Rescue Mission. We gave away 150 meals to families in need. That went successfully. There will be another round of those coming here at the end of December for Christmas boxes. Those are all a program put on by police that we seek out the families, and then we distribute those boxes to the families that are in need. So we were doing that at the end of the month. We have several Shop with the Cop events coming up. They are through the Wichita Police and Fire Foundation. The first event is on the 10th. It's at Shields. They're doing a letting teens walk around Shields. That's sponsored by the Wichita Police Foundation again. And they're using interfaith ministries or the youth ministries kids for that. And then the 11th and 12th at Walmart, we participated with Walmart for the Wichita Police version of the Shop with a Cop, and we'll be taking 10 kids each night around with the officer shopping for kids that we've identified as needing help and letting them pick out Christmas gifts and stuff for themselves. We're coming into Christmas season, everybody knows that. So our big push right now is car thefts and things left inside cars. A lot of times this time of season, people leave the Christmas gifts inside the trunks, inside the back seats, because they don't want their children to see them. We do not recommend that at all, because that's an easy target for thieves that are walking around. We also have a lot of porch pirates that come around this time of year. A lot of Amazon boxes are going to get delivered, so have those prearranged to be picked up or placed inside, because if they're left on the porch too long, they will be taken if a porch pirate comes around that neighborhood and picks them up. So we will see an increase in both of those thefts, so just keep those in mind. And then we have the last city crew event for mascots and city crew members will be at Evergreen on the 16th from 10 to noon. It's Breakfast with the Grinch, so that'll be a good finale. We had a lot of good turnout. I know Angela will probably talk more about it when she gets up, but I just want to make sure everybody knows about it. So does anybody have any questions for me?
Are there any questions for Wichita Police Department from the members of the DAB, online or in person? Any comments? Any questions from members of the public for the Wichita Police Department? Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. I don't know the format. What, my name and neighborhood?
Whatever you feel comfortable doing.
Okay, so my name's Twyla Purity. We're new to this district with rezoning. I live in the Polo Club, but I'm also on the Racial Profiling Advisory Board. And one of the WPD initiatives that's real important to us, and I think important to this district, is community policing. So I'm hoping that on a regular basis, perhaps we could get an update on where the chief is in implementing community policing here in Wichita.
Are you new to Wichita?
Nope, I've been here 17 years.
Okay. We've had a community policing philosophy for as long as I can remember. It is a philosophy, however, here we actually have a community policing unit. It was 10 members per bureau. That was cut down to 5 in August due to staffing issues, trying to get more bodies to patrol. Because we're currently down, I think the last number was 116 officers. So we're trying to feed patrol so the call times drop. So there are 5 of us per bureau that are still out there handling neighborhood complaints, stuff like that. But we can't do near as much as what we used to. The chief, he can talk directly about that. But he is big in community policing, but he's first and foremost trying to get officers on the street and help the citizens, all of the citizens, make calls and do all that stuff.
Based on where this person lives in the Polo Club, have you been able or successful in finding your CPO? And if not, where you can do that online, correct?
It's not about that. It's not about the Polo Club. It's really about kind of this area, this neighborhood, and a sense that the community within the Racial Profiling Advisory Board, that we feel like the community policing efforts are falling very short. And I understand the staffing issue, but and I don't really want to, I'm not the official spokesperson, but I would just like to maybe encourage this board to kind of, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? And if community policing is important to more than just the members of the Racial Profiling Advisory Board, that perhaps y'all can also kind of keep applying a little pressure. Where is this on our priorities? When will we get more police officers? And is it working in the way that the community wants it to work?
I think that last point is critical. This board has often been asking, inquiring, especially with the budgetary answers and everything, and that being an issue. But obviously, best practices helps everyone out, including the taxpayer dollars being used efficiently and everyone's rights being respected as well. So I would say, as a part of that, you as an individual, feel free to come here and speak up anytime, especially as you do your service on that commission, you learn more things that regarding best practices, because we're here to learn as much as you are and learn from you from the discussions you're having on that board as well. And then if you ever have questions specifically on some of the current practices, I think that's a great opportunity for you, the CPO for your area, to be in direct contact with you on, and then that can help further the discussion and make it more informed from all parties involved. And if you need any help finding out how to find out who your CPO is, then after the meeting or can get you in touch with the community service person here, Tasha,
Okay.
and we can show you where to find that on the website as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate your encouragement, and I will take you up on that.
Yeah, you're always welcome.
Right,
If that
thanks.
makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks.
The only thing I can add is, I know all of us up north have direct contact with our neighborhood presidents on a weekly basis. So we are in contact with all the neighborhood presidents, and then they usually disseminate the information we need as well, just as to add to that.
Yes.
Dan Rezer, 1107 North Pinecrest. This is Lansdale. I would very much appreciate it if early next year, February or March, we could have an update on Jensen Hughes and what's being and what's actually been done there, what hasn't been done, and what the plan is about what hasn't been done.
That update will not come from me. That'll be a city, the chief and or council will put that out. City initiatives will put that out. That will not come from me.
I understand, but if you could relay that request, it would be appreciated.
Yeah, I'm sure everything with Jensen Hughes, everything like that will come out over media briefs and everything else. I'm sure of it.
I would be also confident that Councilmember Johnson would be pushing for that updates and reports to go through all the DABs, but for sure DAB 1 will take it up. as well, whenever that information is available. But I've noted it and we'll note it in the minutes as well. And we do have potential topics we'll look at in future agendas. But I know Councilmember Johnson has brought that up in the past of when that information is available, bringing it back for discussion here within District 1, speaking of best practices.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public with questions or comments? Any members of the data?
So just while we're on that topic, and I just wanted to be on record that tomorrow there will be a vote on the FOP contract and the WPD staff are, one of the things up is a bonus, just for being an officer, along with percentage raise, along with another bonus for not breaking any policies. And so just speaking on behalf of citizens that have reached out to me because I am on DAB, they are very curious as to how the Jensen Hughes report will weigh in on the bonuses. And the councilman isn't here right now, but I just wanted to go on record that there are a lot of people in District 1 that are concerned about weighing out bonuses versus Jensen Hughes, and where are we at on that report?
Does any other member of the public or TAB have anything for the police before we move on? All right, thank you so much, officer.
Thank you. Have a good holiday.
Move to the library for an update, which also kindly provided a written update too. That will be a part of the message.
Hi, Ann Ethan from the Wichita Public Library. I manage the Angelo branch as well as the Evergreen branch. I did send a written report, so I wouldn't have to talk very long. We've got several programs coming up at the end of December for kids while they're out of school. The book bus has hit the road and it's going to be making stops at various parks and other entities in District 1. But mostly I just wanted to introduce our new Maya Angelou librarian, Parker Daniel, who has been working with me for a week now. He started out at the Wichita Public Library, got his master's of library science, went to another library for a couple of years, and I was just able to get him back. So he's training. Hopefully shortly after the first of the year, we'll be able to start opening longer hours as planned, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday evenings until 8. And then Parker will be available to do things like one-on-one computer assistance. He'll be doing outreach into the community, and I know he's looking forward to it. So I wanted to bring him in a couple of months. He'll take over doing the district advisory board meetings here. So, questions? I figured you're gonna have some questions.
More of a statement. I am so glad that you are on board. I'm the Wanda DeShays, as you can see. And I really want to get with you because I have some programming ideas. I am with the Wichita Collective Impact, funded through YMCA, Cargill, United Way, USC 259. And we are really charged with trying to increase the 3rd grade reading level. And so I really am looking forward to working with you and bringing programming over to the library that won't cost you anything, but we could have a facility and a space where we could encourage reading. So I'm glad to have you on board.
Thank you.
And we hope it will actually provide impetus and resources to grow that library.
Thank you.
So don't leave without getting my card.
Well, we are gonna leave shortly, so if you've got a card, let me get it from you.
Does Parker want to share?
Yeah.
Like a
Parker,
little,
do you wanna say anything?
I just wanted to say that this is my home neighborhood. I was born and raised here in Northeast Wichita, not very far from here, and this feels like a full circle moment coming back here, and I'm excited to serve this community.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
Any members of the public got any questions or comments for the library? Yeah. Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great to hear the result of the process. I've been so excited for many months.
Yes.
Have a good night, everyone.
you
Good
too.
night. To Parks and Rec.
Good evening. This is Angela Buckner. I'm reporting on the 3 rec centers within District 1. We're going to start out with Brewer. Brewer gym rentals have spiked this month with 2 new rentals, a new volleyball and a soccer rental, which equates to an additional 575 of revenue. Brewer actually pickleball has spiked this month as well, with an average of 12 participants each day from last month. Can you guys all hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Lynette Woodard added 4 new rental groups that will generate an additional 325 for an additional weekly revenue for 12.5 hours of usage. Woodard is currently renting out the gym every day of the week after classes and programs. Woodard's 4-week basketball clinics finished up on Saturday, November 18th, with over 90% attendance for both the youth and the top classes, with over 14 kids registered in class, which generated 224 in revenue. There were a few more participants added after late registrations. Winter registration begins, it started November the 20th. Our winter classes start January 5th through the 16th. Within the first week of registration, Woodard already had 14 people registered for classes. Edgemore Recreation Center is happy to benefit from funding from District 1's Councilman Johnson to use for youth programming at the center. The funding can be used for classes held at the Recreation Center for youth or in-service day camps. Staff is very thankful to have this funding to help out people that may not otherwise be able to sign their kids up for programs. Edgemore has several holiday-themed classes that will be held in December with great enrollment. Cookie decorating, A Christmas Story, has 16 enrolled. Holiday Bath and Body Gifts has 4 enrolled. Rockin' Reindeer Treats for youth has 9 enrolled. Edgemore is also holding a camp during the winter holiday break. Kids Connection is for kids ages 6 to 12, and the cost is $27 a day. The kids need to bring a lunch and drink. Snacks are provided. Kids will participate in a variety of activities such as gym games, game room activities, outdoor play, and crafts. Camp dates are 12/18 through 12/22 and 12/26 through 12/29. Parents, guardians can register for one day or all the dates. Registration usually fills up, so register in advance. A couple of big highlights. This Saturday, December 9th from 5 to 7, the Park and Rec Department is holding our free annual Winter Wonderland event at NASCAR Park for the community. The mayor's tree lighting will kick off the event at 5 p.m. This event is a magical experience for all ages. Fun-filled activities such as roasting s'mores, visiting with Santa and Mrs. Claus, music, lights, and fun. And as Officer Stark briefly mentioned, we have our last City Crew event, which is Breakfast with the Grinch for kids ages 2 to 12. Sign up is free. It's going to be held on Saturday, December 16th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. at Evergreen Rec Center. If you want to participate, grandkid, child, just go to wichita.gov/City Crew and sign up.
Any questions or comments? Parks and Rec? Good job. Any from the public? Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the written report as well. Thank you. Without objection, we'll then receive and file all the staff reports. And then we're gonna move on. Councilman Johnson's delay. We'll just go ahead and do the board updates first. And move to item number 5. So if any member of the DAB has any updates on projects, committee events, etc., we'll go ahead and start.
I have a few things. Number 1, my day job is again with the Wichita Collective Impact. And on December 1, we released a grant giving up to $25,000 to recipients. And what we are looking for is 2024 summer education programs. So in the month of July, we want to augment what the USD 259 does for summer school. And so we want to have other programs alongside that in July. So if you are a nonprofit, I urge you to go to wichitacollectiveimpact.org or for profit, but go to wichitaimpact.org and apply for the grant and let us know how you can help us in our summer program. Our ultimate goal is to to have students reading and doing math at 3rd grade level by 3rd grade. So our program is to help push that initiative, 3rd grade reading level. And then along with that, we're also building up our capacity building partners. And so we want nonprofits to get on board. So maybe you can't run a full program, but maybe you can help do art or craft or something in our community, again, to help us reach that third grade level. And so we are kicking off 3 workshops. The first one would tell you what a Wichita Collective Impact is. Our programming that we're looking for, we're gonna have a workshop on grant writing. And so there are 3 modules altogether. If you attend all 3 modules, we will give you a $300 stipend. And again, we're hoping that you join the Collective Impact. And we just have so many partners that we can push that needle on education in 67214 and surrounding areas. And so again, if you just go to wichitacollectiveimpact.org, you'll see the grant application, or you can always email me, LaWanda DeShazer at ymcwichita.org, and I can give you more information. And I can also get it to Tasha, and she could send it out to as well. Again, it's a grant for up to $25,000, and we're trying to push the needle on third grade achievement levels. My second thing is that, and I don't know, Angela didn't talk about it, but at McAfee Pool, our numbers are down a little bit. And so we are really hoping that we could get more people to come out to the pool this coming summer. If you have a 14-year-old, they can work concessions. If you have a 15-year-old or above, they are eligible to become lifeguards. The city will train you and give you all the certifications necessary. So again, it's something to help boost the numbers out at McAfee. You know, if you have a lifeguard that probably looks like the residents, it may encourage more people to come out. And even if you don't look like the typical resident that you think is in 6724, because actually it's the dynamics in 67214 is everybody. It's a cultural melting pot. And so if you have a young person that is interested in becoming a lifeguard, please reach out to the city of Wichita. I'm just gonna say go through Parks and Rec, and they can send you to the right person, but we really need to boost those numbers at the pool this summer. Councilman Johnson talked about in our last meeting that the bathhouse is scheduled to be completely remodeled and ready to go. And so that should be another incentive to get us out there at the pool this summer. And lastly, one more thing. Carol Brewer, who runs Dorothy's Lane, she has an initiative to help 200 families with Christmas this year. So you can find her on Facebook. You can email me, message me, whatever. But you can find Carol Brewer on Facebook, Dorothy's Lane. And if you want to donate anything that can help 200 families, she is more than happy to take those donations so we can make sure that we can help as many people as possible have a great holiday. That's it.
These are good opportunities, and I'm gonna mention a grant opportunity too. The Wichita Good Life grants to the Wagon Masters and Community Foundation are set up to focus on smaller nonprofits in our community, particularly ones that may not qualify for some of the larger grants. And right now the application process is going on, and it can go to capital funds, it can go to equipment, as well as programming for the next year. And these grants are a little smaller. They average 500 to 1,000 compared to some of the other community foundation grants, but they're we had a record-breaking year through the chili cook-off this September, and so we look forward to supporting as many organizations as possible. And the deadline on that is going to be December 29th. We go to the Wichita Community Foundation. You can Google Wichita Community Foundation, Good Life Grants, and they're handling all that process and the review and the grant making review. But if you or anyone you know would be interested, we look forward to seeing you then at the grant giving celebration then later in the spring. Thanks.
The emergency winter shelter is open. I know that there was lots of conversation around that. It recently opened, so I just encourage fellow DAB board members to go and visit. I know, again, oftentimes when we have concerns, it's different when you're there and you're able to see it in person and able to speak to the reality of the great work that Humankind Ministries is doing. I know several people had the chance to go during the opening and were completely blown away by how they were able to flip that space into an immaculate space for our houseless neighbors. So please know that it's open to everyone to go and tour and visit so you can spread the word about the great things happening in our community. Again, that's a temporary location, but please visit. Also, a Small Business Saturday redo was this past Saturday, but just want to remind folks to always support small businesses in our community. And it's the backbone of our local economy, specifically the Black Print, which is a great place, supports Black entrepreneurs, So if you're looking for places where you want to support Black entrepreneurs, the Black Print is a great place to go at Cleveland's Corner, as well as Revolution, which is in District 1, and it is an amazing place that offers incredible things, including a Black art gallery called Mulberry Art Gallery. So please get out and about and see the great things happening in our district, because oftentimes we don't know those things are there, but through word of mouth and communication, we can celebrate the good things happening.
The updates for the.
Oh, no.
Equity Initiative is a youth development nonprofit here in Wichita, Kansas. We dedicate all of our work and services to middle school and high schoolers. And we offer free tutoring. So if you know any middle schoolers or high schoolers who could benefit from that free service, we're located 1608 East Waterman Street. Free tutoring. We also offer groups on life skills development, and we have an exclusive building called the Activity Lounge for middle school and high schoolers. We're open Monday through Thursday, 6:30 to 9. And you can find us online at equityinitiativeks.com.
You got members online with updates.
I've got one. I'm thankful for virtual today. I plan to be in person, but I'll take this time to remind everyone that texting and driving can cause accidents. So be mindful of that, especially during the busy time. My car was hit at a red light, unfortunately. So I'm dealing with that, but thankful to have virtual. I will also share that we are figuring out a date for the Open Streets, ICT, WSU, and Shocker Neighborhood again this year in April, looking at Sunday, April 14th or the 21st. So we had overwhelming positive feedback from the first one we did last April. So we're planning to do that again, make little tweaks here and there, and continue to build relationships. So put that on your calendar in pencil, and then when we finalize that, you can put it in pen.
Thank you, Nikayla. You hope you're all right. So here, you recovering all right?
Oh yes, I'm good. Thankfully, it was a little bump, but it did cause a bit of damage.
Right, we are going
I thought
to.
you're okay, Nikayla.
Oh,
Thank you.
Yeah, I tend to make that mistake of texting and driving myself, and I've got into
Yeah, it's a thing. Sometimes we just get into our normal habits and we think, oh, just, quickly glance at it. And that's what happened. He said he just, quickly glanced and looked up and it was a red light and he didn't realize it. So yeah, just a reminder, especially when there's more traffic on the roads this time of year, to save it for when you're parked.
all right, we're gonna move to the public agenda, off agenda items. This is any member of the public here. You know what, actually, since Councilmember Johnson's not here, I may defer this to later in the meeting so that if there is some member of the public that would like to comment on something not on the agenda, the council member will get a chance to hear that as well. So without objection, I will defer items number 6, 7, and 8 of the public agenda to later in the meeting. I'm gonna, for now, stick them after item number 10 for our zoning cases. So without objection, we'll do that, and then we'll move into new business on the 37th Street North hydraulic to Hillside, item number 9. Who's here from that?
Which 37th Street first, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of us.
Sorry.
We're on.
I got lost when you started the number of stuff off. I didn't have
Good, you're good.
Getting the PowerPoint pulled up here. My name is Sean Mays. I'm the chief design engineer for the city of Wichita. The project I'm here to talk about tonight is 37th Street North from hydraulic Hillside. I'll give you a little bit of background. This doesn't include actually in January, we approved the design funding for this. It doesn't amount to a whole lot. It's just funding, so we can actually go out for an RFP or RFQ. So they included this, but and then on June 6th, we hired professional engineering consultants to come up with a design concept for 37th Street hydraulic canal site. Next slide, please. Give you a little bit of frame of reference here. I-135 running north-south over on the left-hand side of the screen here. K-96 on the south side of the screen, 254 running north and east on the north side. And then 37th Street there in the middle. Hydraulic just to the east of I-135 and then Hillside on the east end of the project. Current traffic volumes in this area vary a little bit, so I had some at both intersections. At Hillside, there's roughly about 3,300 vehicles a day, and at Hydraulic, there's about 5,900 vehicles a day. That comes into consideration when we're considering what type of section we're looking at.
You hold on for just 1 second. Our Facebook is lagging, and so they can hear you talking, but the screen is like.
Would you repeat the hydraulic numbers today?
Slide. I'm gonna go through some existing conditions. So what's out there now, just so you understand that if you don't know the area. The existing section of 37th is an asphalt mat with ditches on both sides. Some of the ditches are actually going to remain once we're done. We just can't lower the road enough to get everything drained over into the curb and gutter. It will be curb and gutter when we're done, but there will be some ditches, some swales back behind and stay there. So this is looking east at the hydraulic intersection. So you have school district building on the north side here, and then you have Coleman on the south side here. You can see the handrail from the large drainage structure in this area on the right hand side of this. Next slide, please. For the most part, what you're looking at here is it's 2-lane asphalt mat. There are locations at the intersections where it's tapering down from 1 lane to that. There's also a right turn lane into Coleman site on the south side of 37th that we'll look at here in a little bit. We'll look at some concepts. This is looking to the east at the railroad tracks, so roughly about the half-mile line. If you don't know this area, there's a set of railroad tracks. I believe it's the BN that comes through the Hamilton here through this area. It's one of the things we're going to have to work with on the project, is coordinating all the construction we're going to do with the railroad. Probably gonna have to replace the panels at a minimum project. Next slide. And this is at the Hillside intersection looking back to the west. Again, this is 4 lanes that we see in the other section. NARGAC are going to replace to then the curb return on this section at Hillside. I don't know exactly what happened. Looking at street view, there's a difference here where we did some maintenance in this area and it was shortly thereafter or shortly there before, or water got in during that project or something. But the middle lane went to heck pretty quick, and I don't know exactly what happened. So we're gonna replace this. Part of it is too, when we build these intersections now, we'll actually build concrete to extend about 150 feet from the actually in the return. So when people are stopping, what you get with asphalt, especially when it's hot, is you'll end up with some rutting and then some pushing with the brake action. So we put in the concrete intersection and you don't get that. And that's part of what we'll do here. Next slide, please. This is the proposed concept we're looking at is a 3-lane curb and gutter street. Like I said, and I'll go through a couple slides in the future. You can see some arrows where the ditch is going to remain, but we're going to have curb and gutter through this section. I will highlight this area here at the railroad tracks. You can see there's an inset drawing here of kind of what we're looking at. And part of this is we have sidewalks on both sides. So we're weaving the sidewalk through this area. I will point out that through the railroad area, we are going back down to 2 lanes for a couple different reasons. part of it's cost, part of it with the odd number of lanes, you have to have a median in there anyway through that section. So you don't end up with cars trapped based upon that boom coming down. It's got to cover a certain amount of the track. It's a requirement for them. Or if it's a two-way left turn lane, then you could actually get a car stuck in between there. It's a thought process. So they require medians when we do it on number of lanes. I will add, we have a couple medians on this section here where we don't have drives. With the Coleman and the school district in this area, they take up a big chunk of it. So we do have a couple medians that will help give some aesthetic value to the project, something we can plant trees in and different things like that with that area. I did mention, sorry, I'm gonna add one more thing here. I did mention the right decel lane into Coleman. That is what we're putting back on the right-hand side of the screen. On the south side, we are putting back that decel lane due to the number of movements going inside. Next slide, please. For the most part, the rest of it, we widen back out to a 3-lane once we get past the railroad tracks. 3-lane section, and again, it shows it, but we're going all the way up to then the return for the hillside or the hillside intersection. Currently, going back to the last slide, we don't need to go back, but the intersection does not currently meet warrants for a traffic signal. As part of this design process, we had them look at it. We are still looking at options. Part of the reason we are doing this project is to help mitigate some of the traffic that's going to happen when 96 gets tore up. That's part of the KDOT project. So we have a couple different projects. One of them is 21st Street, and it goes from 135 all the way out to 96, and actually a little beyond both those. We're not doing anything with roadways, but we're trying to tie all the signals together with fiber, so you can better coordinate that and try to help out with some of the 96 traffic when 96 starts getting reconstructed with KDOT project here in the near future. So this is another component of it. This is the only section of 37th that is not improved, that is not a 3-lane or 4-lane or 5-lane from Broadway all the way to Webb. And then it actually stops at Webb. 37th through kind of curves around River Street. But next slide, please. Talk a little bit about the ditches that are going to remain, particular on the west end of the project. Those ditches are going to remain. We have a little bit by the tracks. So anywhere you see the black arrows on this diagram is where there will still be a ditch behind the back curve, because again, we just cannot lower the road enough and keep the drainage that we need to be able to get stuff to drain completely out. Next slide. Again, you have a few there next to the tracks. You have a few on the south side, and you'll notice you end up with some areas in some locations, and in other locations there's not. Part of that is there's a drainage structure there. Part of it is we can't lower it enough to get rid of the ditch completely, and then we have to pick it up in our storm sewer and take it somewhere else, whether that's to a crossing like that or the crossings you have near the west end of the project. Next slide. If you want, you can actually hit Control and click on this link. If it works, good. If it doesn't have to. It'll pull up the YouTube video. Yeah, good. Yeah. So this is a video that flies through what the project will look like when we're done. So this is hydraulic intersection. We're going to the east. Again, you can see the existing proposed 3-lane sidewalk, 6-foot sidewalk on both sides. Reconstructing driveway approaches with the project. You can see we're putting in some medians where there are not driveways needed, either due because they've already given up access control, or there are no driveways there's now, or a combination of two. If we need to adjust those during the design process because somebody wants different drives and they're allowed to have them, we can do that. This is where we're showing them at this point. So here's the decel lane into the Coleman facility, which is on the south side. And then you can see the railroad tracks coming up here. The other part of this I'll point out is the Evergy transmission lines on the south side. We are staying out of those with this project. We do dive back down with the sidewalk on the Coleman property, to try to get through a median area for them. Try to help out, pull them away from their driveway is humongous out of the street because of radiuses and truck movements and stuff. So we're trying to pull back so it's not quite as far to walk across. Again, this is all just 3-lane section. For the end of it, at the very end here, this was the preliminary that they put together. It doesn't show us going all the way to the end of the return on the video. That's what we're going to.
Question on your prophetic capability. How long is this gonna be good for traffic wise by being so constrained?
By being so constrained, what do you mean by constrained?
The 2 to 3 lanes there. What if there's lots more traffic in the next 10 years?
I don't see that being an issue.
So that's,
I mean, we just built the section to the east in the last 5 to 7 years. I don't see any major issues with it. We just built a section about 10 years ago to the west. We teamed up with Bel Air for the section east of the Coke facility. So
we're pretty content with this being good for a while.
Even the section back to the west where you have a considerable amount more industrial traffic or just as much, if not more, there is no major issues with that. If we did think there was issues, all we would do is look at going concrete through the whole section. Would be one thing we could look at possibly doing. That messes with our budget, but that would be one thing we could look at doing based on the amount of volume you have here. Even if you have some of the large truck movements and more of them than we typically see, I don't see this being a problem.
And we're talking about without additional numbers in heavy truck traffic, additional numbers. You're not anticipating, say 10 years.
You may get some for the short term. The 96 is under construction.
But
And then you
people
may have,
expect that.
some of this developed. But the vast majority of this is reasonably developed. Coleman has some, I believe, on the south side. Coke has some on the north side. But Coke has all the stuff on the north side of 37th, north of where the facility is now.
Mhm.
So I don't see there being a vast
Increase in
onslaught of
traffic.
new development in this area based on the current owners and what's already been developed.
So this may be good for 20-25 years.
I would say if we do maintenance as we should, I don't see any reason it couldn't be longer than that.
Excellent.
And you still have to maintain, you still have to come out and.
Yeah,
do
the
some service
maintenance is
treatment.
the hard.
I understand completely. The approved budget for the project is $495,000. That's we approved in January. That was to start to design. That's just all the money that was programmed in the first year, which is when we start to design. The adopted 2024-2033 capital improvement program includes $550,000 in 24 and $5.5 million in 2025 for a total budget of $6.545 million. All this is local sales tax funding. Excellent. We'll take the design concept to City Council on January 9th and anticipated construction. We're looking at summer of 2025. We may try to move that up. Some of that depends on where KDOT and the 96 project is, but the intent would be to get this project constructed before that one starts. One of the things I didn't mention is we're gonna go down to 1 lane of traffic during construction. What I proposed was westbound, but if anybody has any heartburn or thoughts about that, we can go eastbound just as easily. That's not something we have to decide right now. If there's some discussion needs to happen about that. Typically, we're looking at people coming into the city as when they're less tolerant as far as going around the detour. You're going home, it seems to not be as big a deal, so that's why I chose that, because there is no, if somebody wants to propose that we go the direction, the only thing I can tell you is with the railroad, you have to cross on the right side. So that creates some issues that have to work out as part of the phasing of the project. Meaning if I'm going westbound, I can't be on the south lane, even if it's down to 1 lane, because I have to be on the protected side of the city. That makes sense.
Are there any DAB members who want to speak directly to that? Since that would probably be a qualifying amendment to a recommendation. Any strong preferences in the west or east? Before we go back to the DAB, there's opportunity for members of the public to ask questions about this project. Yes.
What kind of barrier would it be? And that sidewalk appears to cross the railroad.
What type of barrier? There would be no barrier. I mean, how are you gonna get across the tracks if there was a barrier? We will have ADA, they're called raised domes, to be able to notify somebody who is visually impaired that there is something coming up. And that's part of, I don't know if we can go back to concept, but that's part of the reason the railroad would like us to put these at a specific perpendicular angle to be able to go through there. So you're going across, straight across to the tracks. And that creates a problem for us because the railroad tracks are like this and our road's straight. But that would be the intent, is there wouldn't be any barrier there. What we'd have to do is the existing panels into the certain point here, to be able to widen out far enough, we're gonna have to replace all those panels more like that. The railroad had said we could extend those on different projects. That is no longer their philosophy. It's probably the best way to put it. We just have to replace the whole thing. And based on what we're seeing here, that's what these little red areas are here. These are the raised dome areas you will see when you're crossing the tracks. And that's something we still have to work out with the railroad. We have to approve our design, some of that type of stuff. So this is not set in stone. This is exactly, we got to figure out. They got a driveway on the northwest side that's kind of odd, and you can kind of see if we put it back in on this concept. Ideally, we'd do something a little bit different there, but we haven't met until we actually get a concept approved. Talk through some of the design elements.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Couple questions. One is on the hydraulic exit. What would it take to get a light put in there? I know your traffic studies.
Has to meet warrants.
Have to be what?
Has to meet warrants. And I can get you a list of them, but there's 8 different warrants you need to meet. You need to meet one of them. Typically, we are looking at something like the 4 to 8 hour warrant as far as meeting that to be able to put in a signal. With that being said, we can evaluate this as we go through. We can also take into consideration really close that we could potentially look at putting in a signal if knowing 96 is coming, and that's going to impact it too. If we're really close or on the border of being able to put in a signal, that's something we can look at. I don't remember from the numbers right now exactly how close we were, but I didn't think it was on that close.
My guess is your traffic studies don't count the near misses that happen at that intersection every day. Because I do go through the intersection every day, but that's fine. Second question. I would like to have a discussion about going eastbound instead of westbound. Okay. As you go eastbound, Coleman and the fuel plant have their turnoffs. So the eastbound would seem to flow better, and then the semis can get to into the, where they're going in with the turnout at Coleman. It seems like eastbound would work better. Realizing that you're going to have the trains either way, but all of the employees that I work on the south side of 37th on the east of the railroad tracks. It seems like there are more trains, and maybe you have the traffic count. Seems like there's more times in the evenings where we're having to go out to the east to avoid the train that's stopped on the tracks versus going eastbound in the mornings and not have the train stopped on the tracks. And so eastbound would help those that work in at EB, Standard Beverage, the equipment dealer that's up there. Just seems like eastbound would flow better for traffic the way we see it.
Move to public comment or question. Any other members of DAB? Now, for this, it's like I heard earlier you mentioned that the design had been approved, the budget had been approved. What are you looking for?
Approval of the design concept.
Got it. All right.
more or less the 3-lane where we're necking out to 2-lane through the railroad tracks. That type, that.
Understood. Is there anyone that would like to make any amendments besides just an approval of the design concept? Or anything else? If not, I'll put forward a motion to approve the design concept staff recommendations. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Second.
Before we vote, can we add about looking at eastbound, just so?
And that we're not putting a, like, we're gonna look into it, we're not
Yes,
giving you our.
yes, absolutely.
Yes, I
I think
can
we'll have
follow.
discussion.
So it's a motion to approve the design concept with the understanding that west or eastbound flow traffic during construction can be decided at a later date with further feedback. One, and then with that, I will say, all in favor, say aye. Opposite sign, aye. Any opposed? Opposed, it's unanimous. Thank you. We are now going to move to item number 10. Ordinance creating chapter 20.12 of the city code of Wichita pertaining to retaliatory evictions.
Hi, thank you. My name is Nate Johnson. I'm with the Law Department of the city. We put an ordinance together that was considered by council a week or two ago, focused on new fines, fine structure for retaliatory evictions. Tracks a lot of state law. I'm going to kind of do the presentation that I did more or less at city council. And a big push that we got was to get as much consideration from the district advisory boards as we can. It's been a little like roundabout how we've done this process, but I'm happy to be here. And what we're asking for is really any comments, thoughts, anything that you have on the ordinance draft that we have here. We're going to take that back to council for their meeting, tentatively scheduled, not for sure yet, but for the 19th of December. Kind of the last meeting council of the year. That's how they set it up at the last meeting, and that's what I'm doing before. So really, any comments, questions, I'm more than happy to answer them, and I like talking about this stuff too. So really, any questions you have as well. Oh, thanks. Yeah, save it a little easier. So this was brought up because the city has historically received reports of retaliation by housing providers in the rental market. Those reports have included accusations of eviction, but retaliatory evictions, despite the name, is not just about evictions, about things like diminished services, increased rent, and all of that done in response to normally a request to make the place more habitable. That might be a request for a code inspection. It might be reaching out to some other regulatory agency. It might even just be asking the landlord to make repairs to the property. But the idea is some sort of retaliation based on a housing code or otherwise a habitability complaint. That's what we kind of call that, livability in the landlord tenant world. Housing code inspections, our experience in the city is they do occasionally result in observations of substandard housing conditions, not every time, but there are some. And that has directly related to adverse health outcomes for residents and a significant enough problem that we want to try to at least bring it up for consideration to the DABs and council as well. Also, the reports have varied by council district. I'll say Councilmember Johnson has provided a number of anecdotal and other reports to council when we've been considering this at workshop and otherwise, and that's been a big push behind this as well. But other council districts have been, at least based on the council members' experience, had the same kind of situation with retaliatory evictions, or at least as a common instance in their district. There's also been recent local news coverage on the issue as well from a variety of local sources. I don't have those here, but just kind of that's where we're getting our information of what the scope of the problem is. The proposed retaliatory eviction ordinance, I almost said next slide after you handed this to me, so thank you. Maybe. Am I not close enough now? Too far away. Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. So this is based on a retaliatory eviction ordinance that was passed in Topeka in July of 2023. We've added also a way to administratively address potential complaints under this ordinance, which I'll detail a little bit later, and that sets us apart from that. But I will say a lot of this ordinance is dictated by state law. State law generally governs the issue of retaliatory evictions in landlord-tenant relationships. The statutory references right there. It says a landlord may not retaliate with increased rent, diminished services after a habitability complaint. That kind of ties the housing code. It also may be things under the lease. It doesn't only have to be housing code, but if it ties to habitability of the property or attempting to organize as part of or start a tenants union, then the tenant as a defense to eviction if they can prove retaliatory eviction after an eviction case is brought against them. There's also a claim a tenant can bring for actual damages. They have to bring the lawsuit against the landlord. It doesn't necessarily happen all that often, but there is an actual damages kind of claim that's available to tenants if they're in that situation. It's kind of difficult to bring that while you're living there too. So we're kind of considering other ways to potentially get at this problem. Landlords still, under state law, may bring an eviction action for legitimate reasons too. If someone's behind on rent, if they violated the lease agreement, or a lot of times too, maybe the habitability issue is related kind of to the tenant's issue with the property. As long as those are legitimate bases for eviction, the landlord can still bring an eviction action, even if there's been a kind of simultaneous housing code complaint or some other complaint. If there's a housing code complaint and someone's behind on rent, you can still be evicted for being behind on rent, even if you make the complaint. But there are no other protections other than this defense to eviction and a claim for damages under state law. So that's kind of what we're looking at a little bit as well. The proposed ordinance supplements state law, and we can't go in conflict with it. This is a pretty comprehensive area of law as well, but we can try to supplement the penalties or other issues that exist under state law by instituting fines for a conviction based on retaliatory eviction. We employ similar definitions as state law in this proposed ordinance, so we avoid potential conflicts. This is a bit of a technical issue, but for any legal nerds out there, we've got this proposed ordinance and it applies to all tenants. At the state level, there's a distinction between residential tenants and what are manufactured or mobile home tenants to somewhat distinguish those two. But a lot of the same rules apply. The same rules apply for retaliatory evictions, so we've kept it all in the same space here. And what we've also tried to do is clearly identify the actions by a landlord that are not retaliatory, so it does not conflict with state law. If a local ordinance conflicts with state law, it's not enforceable and is void. So we're trying to avoid that situation while still getting at the problem as best we can. Again, those are seeking possession or an eviction action for things like unpaid rent, lease violations, or if the lease is over, something like that. There might even be situations where code compliance requires a tenant to leave, and there's ways to deal with that too. That's all set out in state law, but those are still reasons a landlord can seek eviction and it's not retaliatory. Now, what are we doing? We're kind of changing this a little bit from the Topeka model, and just to kind of give a little bit of background on that, we're trying to use an administrative process to deal with potential complaints from tenants. The way that it's set up in Topeka is to not really have an administrative process. Folks can just submit complaints to the city. And we've tried to set up at least a little bit more organized way for people to submit complaints, including forms prepared by the city, and then a set of really options to either mediate, potentially settle, or if a claim needs to go through court, then it goes through the municipal court, which functions as a quasi-adjudicative or administrative judge. So it's not an actual municipal court decision. It's a fine instituted under city law, but it can be subject to appeal like all administrative fines under city law. And those are appealed to the district court and then through the state court process. And this is really based on the way that we do the non-discrimination ordinance in the city. It uses the same timelines, the same use of forms. So we've become a bit more familiar with that process at the city. So that seems like a useful administrative process. Yeah.
So one of the things I noticed about doing the administrative process, you also have the administrative fine. And so I'm seeing this process. Is this based on research with other cities similar size that have these, you think, because I think about cost to the city in this pipeline as well, and the mediation and everything else, and that the fine is at that certain level. So one, I didn't know if that was set up like that, just reading through this just now for getting revenue back to oversee the process, similar that we did with Airbnbs, right? Or yeah, because there's that, and there's also just the influx, a potential influx, or like how many of y'all are expecting based on research you have with other cities.
There's not a lot of other cities that have this kind of ordinance. Topeka is the only one that does, and July was when they passed there. So there's not a lot of information on it necessarily. We've had about 5 complaints under the non-discrimination ordinance since it was passed, which gives you kind of an idea. So we tried to make it so that there's an administrative process. So there's both an opportunity for folks to be able to submit complaints in a very clear way to be able to do that, while, like you said, trying to balance the ability of staff to be able to handle the number of potential complaints. And the fact that an administrative process might exist also might I don't want to say filter out legitimate claims, but also kind of make sure people have sufficient evidence to bring those claims to us so that we can evaluate them. And we'll have forms that sort of detail everything that people need to submit. And if we don't get a complete form, then we send it back to folks to update that. We've also talked with our finance department about this, and I think I've got that on the last slide there, but just to jump ahead slightly, and they don't have any serious concerns with this financially. We expect fines to potentially offset costs, but the only major cost would be city paid mediation, as you noted. And that's just, it's not been picked as an option yet. And I think a lot of folks maybe come in and they've got a dispute and then don't necessarily want to mediate. And they would like to have it adjudicated instead of trying to work with someone that they have an issue with. And that's fine too. There may be other reasons, but it just hasn't come up that much in our current administrative processes. And again, we think the fine structure is set up to at least cover those kinds of potential costs.
For the purpose of the administrative process also, though, we talked about this before, when we had the issues with some of the sites in District 1, was that what's your other option under state law than to sue, and then you have legal fees and everything like that. So regardless of this administrative process, where it's mediation or going through the administrative judge, that's just gonna protect them as well on cost.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, exactly. So the benefit then is there's no cost on either the landlord or the tenant really through this process, but we can hire attorneys if we want to. And there is an opportunity to ask for attorney's fees back, depending on what the situation is. But that's not a necessity. And the idea too is to have this administrative process hopefully help guide folks, maybe even coming to a decision. We also have an opportunity for settlement once it gets to the municipal court judge too. So it's written in there to kind of continue to push to settle things as much as possible. And we also believe that would maybe facilitate an ongoing landlord-tenant relationship depending on the situation too.
I just wonder, how easy is it gonna be for a renter to know about this?
Right, and that's kind of the big issue. We're trying to do our best to get as much information out as we can through district advisory boards. We would work through the housing department to share as much information as we can. One thing that was mentioned and we've been working on updating is in the past year, the housing department's landlord tenant handbook. So as we kind of get those things finalized at the end of the year, we are hoping to do kind of a big communications media push at least about that information. And I don't want to necessarily speak for him, but I know Councilmember Johnson has talked some about that as we facilitate that information to people.
And there's some concern about out-of-state owners, out-of-state landlords. And are we looking at a way to control some of the negligence on the part of people who just aren't here?
We have looked into that some, as maybe you recall from the short-term rentals. It's a little tricky discriminating against out-of-state landlords just because they're out of state. Now, that if someone's negligent on their property and not present, that's a different kind of issue.
We can mandate minimums, this or else, but what is or else?
It's tough in the landlord-tenant. I'm gonna be honest, it's tough in a landlord-tenant situation at the city level because most of it is dictated by state law. And we can't conflict with or really do much that's different than state law on that subject.
We can't go beyond state law with requirements.
Not really. That's why we're trying to just add fines to things that are already considered inappropriate activity under state law.
But if it's an out-of-state investor though, and they have their own foreign agent registered LLC here, and they have problems.
And if they're here, they need to be handling it.
But I'm saying they're gonna still be notified that they're gonna go through the same process as a local landlord. I just think in that regard, what the city has is the local landlord would be at an advantage being able to go through this process versus the one that's out of state. And I imagine part of the mediation process and the administrative process is then it's more of an annoyance on an out-of-state landlord to respond to these queries in a duly manner. So that actually could be not intended, but indirectly then favoring local landlords without it overreaching on property rights for those that are out of state.
Are you almost through with the presentation?
Pretty close.
Because I'd like to hear what you have to say before I ask.
Oh, yeah,
you
no,
questions.
yeah, and I am pretty close to done too. I think, I'm sorry. Maybe I'm almost done.
Not
We
rushing
go to the
you,
next
that's what
slide. Oh, no, of course, yeah. And the button works after you press the button, thank you. So just to go through the penalties really quick too, I do want to note, the draft ordinance that we have still has the penalty starting at about $100 for the first conviction. That's not our recommendation, that's not what the second reading is gonna be once we get to that point, or if we get to that point with council. It's this $250 for first conviction up to $1,000, and then it kind of goes up $250 on the low end, $500 on the high end. And there's the prevailing party may seek costs and fees from the case. And my apologies for not getting this to you earlier. This presentation is on the city council website for their past meetings, but I'll make sure I send it around too. There's kind of, yeah, it was just planning issue on our side. I'll make sure that gets around to everybody so they've got this information as well. I will note, this is in the staff report though. So the staff report has the correct numbers for the fines that are being proposed for the potential offense. And this kind of gets us to the financial considerations. We think they're going to be pretty limited. Mediation costs would be estimated at most around $750 per complaint, but that's really only when you get to that point. We would do an initial analysis of the complaints for completeness, looking to determine whether there actually is even probable cause under the laws, or if someone has a different kind of complaint that doesn't really fit under this law. And then we give people the option of, do you want to file an answer or submit an answer as a landlord? Should we look at mediation options, or do we need to do more of a thorough investigation on our side even? Those are all potential options that are available and generally covered by the city, but we don't think that there's going to be much cost, especially with potential fines offsetting those costs. I drafted this ordinance, so I think it's fine. But no, we've kind of like reviewed it, and we've gone through workshops and trying to just get as much common as we can. And this is mostly tried to track state law with definitions, but then adding on to when you have a retaliatory eviction conviction through our administrative process, then these fines can be imposed. So this is just the last recommended action for city council, but this I did want to leave this because our second reading, we've made a note to correct those findings. But thank you so much for the presentation. Happy to answer any questions from anybody as well, but really comments, thoughts, that's what I'm here for, to try to report back.
Yeah, with workshopping this, I'm curious, if you could speak, I saw you modeled off Topeka where it mentioned specifically the requesting repairs, but also specifically to a governmental enforcement agency. I didn't know if we need to note that to be a regulatory agency as well, because someone they might report to could be regulatory. But why also with the tenants union on there? Because there are other cities that have passed ordinances where even if that was included, there were other considerations for them. I would think like a individual goes to the news, and we saw that even happen in Wichita, or someone basically not included yet sought the assistance of a community organization to remedy a code violation or an illegal practice. I think that could be a consideration as well, especially when it comes to education to tenants. Knowing what's going on, it could be a community organization that actually informs them of this process. Yeah, I would just say like those seem way more important. They're testifying publicly about a condition, whether it is to the news or is to the council. I think those should be considered as well if you're going to do this, especially with that lack of information to renters.
If I might say real quick, the reason we did model it that way is that's again how state law defines.
We're not able to. Okay,
well, I'll type that for sure, but generally it's just kind of hard to add more reasons for it to be a defense to eviction, because then it cuts into what the landlord's eviction power is, basically. Right. And that's the kind of conflict we're hoping to avoid, but totally understanding that as well. Those situations, it is difficult because just speaking to the media is not really usually a lease violation. So that's on its own, not often, and again, I don't know every lease, but not often a reason for eviction necessarily. And that may be the impetus for a landlord to act on something like non-payment of rent when they were giving some more leniency.
Or just an increase.
Yeah, and that's kind of the issue. It's like when there is another legitimate basis for eviction, it's very difficult to just stop that, basically, even if there are other things going on. But yeah, again, taking notes on all this too, and we're gonna look into all.
I was trying to see, yeah, what's possible would be.
Oh, of course, yeah, no,
If
yeah,
we
for
had the
sure. I'm
issue-
trying to respond to some on here too, though.
We had the
Yeah.
issue in District One with the news and some retaliation over certain tenants. But then I guess my biggest concern is when it comes to the fine process. As there's been feedback, I remember reading some of the local articles on this, whether folks had a strong opinion for or against implementing this. It seemed that folks are in agreement that they're, especially though some council members that this doesn't come up that often. So, but when it does come up, it seems our issue are habitual violators, right? And that's where the biggest complaints are, the idea of mold present somewhere versus a broken light bulb. So my gut would be pretty harsh on habitual, and go very harsh on habitual. And actually, I don't, maybe you can't because of state law, but if when there's a habitual violations and we're looking at someone that is living in completely derelict area because of the landlord's negligence, I would also like to see there being some rental payment reimbursement to the tenant under those situations. I don't know whether that's like 10 violations, 5 violations, but it seems like the impetus in part for this change was not for where there's, a confusion or mix up because one little item didn't get repaired. It seems that the impetus, and I love Councilmember Johnson to speak to this, was repeated violations and just gross negligence that under most circumstances could have been civilly liable against the landlord, but then these tenants don't have that remedy or know how they can go about that to sue the landlord for violating their own responsibilities in a rental agreement. Because I think that's where I would look at harsher, and I'm curious then why there wouldn't be any payment back to the tenant if there is this like 10 times habitual violation by a landlord against the tenant.
For sure. I guess a couple pieces of that. The comment, yeah, definitely. We've been talking a lot about the fine level. Honestly, that's been a big, that's why I was wrong on one of them and correct on this other staff report. But yeah, definitely take that information back. And just to note, kind of the section on penalties is called habitual penalties - habitual violators. That is kind of the idea, but yeah, finding the right amount seems like an issue. Also, if a tenant prevails in a claim in our administrative process against the landlord, I would think they could probably use that to bring a claim more easily to recover their damages potentially. And that's kind of how we're thinking about it a little bit, to connect those pieces, but totally understand sort of the harmed party doesn't necessarily benefit from the fine structure for sure too.
Yes.
Okay, so having family and friends on both sides, tenants and landowners, where, if someone is being evicted or, I know that sometimes tenants go in and destroy the property, and so I just want to make sure that we have a balance between the two. So, we don't want, someone, like I say, to be behind on rent and then claim, oh, I'm getting evicted because of something else. And so I just want to make sure that we have a balance to actually quickly be able to go and look at the property and make sure that the landowner, the owner didn't do something. It's just a matter of the tenant not being happy.
And that is kind of another benefit basically of drawing it narrowly consistent with state law. They don't affect any of the processes for a landlord to inspect the property after move out. It doesn't affect any claim that the landlord would have against the tenant for damages to the property. And even under this, in case that sort of situation affected a claim for retaliatory eviction, the tenant would need to demonstrate that they did not cause the issues on the property. There's still a burden, and that's kind of why we set up the process to send us some, provide us some information and evidence so we can evaluate the claim and determine whether there's problems.
And so are we looking at a tenant that's already been evicted, or they've gotten the notice, you got the pink notice?
It really is any tenant, honestly. So the phrase usually is retaliatory evictions, but this would cover not only evictions, but increased rent in terms of retaliation and diminished services. So changing utilities, cutting off water, electricity, power, stuff like that. So it does affect all of those kinds of retaliation.
Yeah, and that's what I guess the landlords, some of them would say, even though there's a due process here, there is some type of distraction and opportunity costs on just the landlord then having to prove whether the rent went up because of certain changes, or they evicted because of non-payment versus then the tenant coming back saying, oh, they didn't fix that light bulb, or they didn't fix this vent or something like that. I know that's the purpose of the due process, but I could see how some landlords would be worried that that could become a red tape nightmare for them as well, which then may actually put them in the position to charge more or neglect, or be in the position to neglect some of their other responsibilities as landlords while doing the process.
Yeah, and understand, and that's kind of, again, the way these kind of interact too, it's most of the situations will be at the point of an eviction before this issue is brought up. So it does affect other things, but to get to your real question, it's like, it really is about evictions. If a landlord is able to evict someone in district court, and they tell us that, it's gonna be kind of difficult for us to determine otherwise on this, like, just practically speaking. If they got a legitimate eviction through district court, we can't really just kind of ignore that. And that can be used as an answer or a defense to the case pretty easily, I think. And then the tenant wouldn't have cause to move forward at that point if they were evicted for a legitimate basis, because that's a defense under both state law and the proposed ordinance.
Yeah.
So a lot of it really does fit together, and landlords usually and have kind of a record at least, so this might be a little easier just in my experience, but that's not to say there isn't potential opportunity costs and things we need to balance too, for sure.
So on the tenant side, then, as soon as they get notice that something's changing, that's when they should come to the city and file a complaint, correct? So if you complain, your electrical side.
Right, yes, with the complaint
Right.
condition.
And so then I get a notice that, oh, my rent's going up. At that point, they should come to the city as opposed to waiting.
Well, so I'll say should is a strong, I just don't wanna necessarily say should, since I'm not their
Right.
attorney,
Okay.
but like, when someone has a right claim or a claim that fits the qualifications, they can bring it right when that happens. And we've set a deadline of, you do actually need to bring a claim if you're going to within 180 days of the last act, basically. If it's ongoing or continuous, it doesn't have to be 180 days from the first one, but from the last incident that's occurred. So it gives people a little bit of time, considers, just things happen, maybe the situation worked out, stuff like that too. That's why I don't want to necessarily say should too. But when someone has a claim that meets the elements of the ordinance, they can bring it then. They don't have to wait for an eviction.
I have a few questions, and I think you start off on the first one because I've seen this with other ordinances where what people think it means is not what it really means. And I think we just seen an example of that. So how is the city or the law department going to educate the average individual who doesn't understand law terms? I'm one of them, but just layman terms of when they should or when they may have the ability to utilize this ordinance should it pass.
Well, and I think, I don't want to necessarily speak for our communications department, but we've been working with them to get this information ready to get out as best we can, basically through these kind of processes, provide information at neighborhood resource centers, use our social media accounts, work with council members afterward, work with the housing department. I've been working some too with the eviction resolution program. That's a new thing at the district court that offers resources and services to folks, especially mediation related services once they're facing an eviction. So in my work in this area, that is honestly the biggest barrier. And that's something that we are talking about constantly and trying to share that information as much as possible. I am kind of excited that the landlord tenant handbook might get out there soon too. And that's written with some legal language so people have that. but also from a little bit more of an easier to digest perspective, things like checklists for tenants written out by question instead of like statute and stuff like that. So that handbook does exist now, but we're trying to really revamp it. We're kind of waiting to see how council does on the ordinance and everything too. But yes, definitely taking that to heart as our big push afterward.
All right, because my fear is that someone will think that they can remain in their home while this ordinance is still in effect, and then they come to find out that they don't even qualify to utilize this ordinance, and then because they were relying on this and misunderstood, now they're in a bind.
Well, I'll just say generally, when you're a tenant, you just shouldn't assume that you have a defense.
I hear you.
No, and I'm just trying to say that, so I'm just getting it out there as like kind of the statement here.
And I don't know if the average person would know that if they're not into. The other thing that it says, the city manager from a list of mediators approved in advance by the city council. Do we have who that list is?
Well, no, because we haven't passed the ordinance yet. We would put it together once we have the authority to do so. But we can try to. I'll need to check, but we can try to work with DABS again as we like put that list out. Or once it's together, I can make sure it gets this way too. But they just wouldn't put that list together until we've got the ordinance, basically.
And those folks would be individuals who have the background and like law, I'm assuming. I mean, if you're gonna mediate between a tenant and a landlord, certainly.
Yeah, it depends who our pool of applicants would be or who we could get on board, but usually mediation is done by former judges or attorneys in the field of law. I don't think we would probably have anyone without a law license. But again, if nobody applied, maybe we would train someone or something like that potentially, but mediation is usually done by someone who was a judge in the field, honestly, but it might also be attorneys depending on how specific the area is.
And the city manager has full disclosure to decide who that is.
Yeah,
Who's
so,
approved
yeah,
by the city council.
yeah, yes. Yeah, I think that's how it's.
And so that would be made public. If the city council has to approve the list.
Yeah, I don't think there would be any reason that it would be confidential.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll definitely check on that right afterward too and try to set up, so once we've got that info, we can share it too.
Okay, I also have a question I mentioned earlier, like a lot of people don't understand legal jargon. I'm one of them. I'm curious if this is a typo or if you maybe can provide some education for me. Where it reads, I believe it's section 5. Section 5B2, notwithstanding section 20.12.030 of the city code says the landlord may increase rent, and number 2 says the increase is made in good faith to compensate the landlord for expenses incurred as a result of acts of God. Can you maybe elaborate on?
Yeah,
what
storms, disasters, stuff like that.
Okay.
That's a phrase that's state law too, but that's more like a horrible sort of like catastrophe happens that nobody predicts.
Like a natural disaster.
Weirdly,
Okay.
that's a legal phrase sometimes too.
Yeah, I
but
know.
Yeah, for sure.
I just think some people would read that and think otherwise.
No, totally, yeah,
Um,
yeah. We're thinking more here like tornado.
Okay.
Yeah, stuff like that.
That's a fair question too, though, because I
Absolutely.
feel like landlords, if there are legitimate complaints and they actually listen to them and then correct a lot of these problems, if they're bigger repairs, there is an argument. Right? Depending. If they're upkeep or the idea to like.
There could be.
And that's where it's like, that seems
Yeah.
that, I know you said this is mainly about evictions, but that's where it seems like it's getting muddy. Is then folks not understanding and then saying, well, my rent increased and I complained this many months ago about this. And then now, right, and the tenant doesn't know in their mind, like, oh, the property tax increased on the, or yes, they had to put in all this new equipment or all this new capital into the building. And so, yes, they increase rents to maintain the property and maintain their business. I could see, I know I'm not maybe advocating to get rid of that as a retaliatory, but I could see how that would be the muddiest area versus the clarity of an eviction as a retaliation versus just the normal business practices of a landlord who is acting in good faith.
Yeah, and to add on that, I think that's why the education piece is so important, because District 1 has one of the highest, when you look at the ratio of homeowners versus renters. I mean, if this ordinance were to pass, it would, open up the opportunity for a lot of folks who feel discriminated against or retaliated against to maybe utilize this ordinance, but if we're not complementing that with education, because if you've never been a homeowner before, do you understand or have the need to understand property taxes and different things of that nature? And when property taxes increase for the landlord, then there may be a need to increase the rent. And so how are we providing that education at the same time as holding some landlords who do wrong by tenants, which we have seen that does happen in this district specifically, holding them accountable when they violate a renter's rights. So I'm just, that's why I asked about the education piece. And then the last thing is, what is the current model or process for landlords who take advantage of the public housing agency and or the Section 8 vouchers when they violate renters' rights through HUD? What does that current process look like for those tenants? Is there one? Should that be mentioned in this actual ordinance? Should a landlord still receive public housing assistant vouchers if they violated so many times?
I mean, HUD has its own rules first.
I
Yeah,
would-
and that's kind of that's the first issue. Yeah, and that's kind of what we work with public housing. So first, this ordinance probably can't deal with that exactly because we implement policies that are consistent with like the Section 8 program or Housing Choice Voucher program. And those rules are all set by HUD, which is an even higher level of sort of preemption of things that we can do. I will say that there is a process for being out of compliance as a landlord. I don't want to speak out of turn because it's like a client that I work with, the housing department basically, but we do go through that process sometimes and evaluate whether a landlord is abiding by the terms of their agreement with us and with the tenant to determine whether they can continue to be a provider under, say, the Housing Choice Voucher program. And that is something that we do. And we have taken that action sometimes as well, for sure.
Maybe this seems naive because I'm sorry, this is a naive question. We had the big housing presentation recently on the funding. And I like where you're going because it was clear, correct me if I'm wrong, that then the city's involvement in dispersing those block grants and everything else, and the city's involvement, there was the involvement, what was the committee?
So there's the Affordable Housing Review Board.
Right. And then we talked about some of the bigger projects.
I'm sorry, it's just kind of a different part of the housing department where they're funding different projects to either rehabilitate or purchase properties, basically.
I didn't know if there was, just for transparency purposes, with all this potentially going in place, to what you were bringing up, if there is just some way if there is a violation or habitual violator, when they're coming forward, especially if the city is involved, even if it's a different department or a different section within a department, that developer, that business owner entity that has been flagged it's just communicated somehow that they have been in violation. So, and yes, they can get due chance to explain what they're doing differently now or something like that, and maybe the situation will never happen. But it's more when we were talking about so much money being utilized, it just seems like if the city is already going about this and the issue is really to flag habitual violators, and to be transparent with funds and accountable with funds, if that's possible.
Oh yeah, and I'm happy to look into it. And I'll need to double check which presentation was made to you all. If it was kind of about the Affordable Housing Review Board kind of funds and that process, that is a little different than landlords because it's more about purchasing property and it might result in sort of like tenant-based properties and things like that. So that's kind of the angle that I'm gonna look at. But I won't say it's like a perfect match in my head yet, but I'll definitely look into it and see what we can add to that piece. I sit on that board too and go to those meetings as well. And that's really just a lot of looking at whether applications meet HUD guidelines. But if there is that overlap, that's something I think we probably should consider for sure.
So you mentioned the evictions resolutions department or is that
Eviction resolution program with the district court. Yeah. And that's on the district court, the District 18 website. There's an evictions tab on the left side now, and that information is available there.
So that's another resource.
You'll see a couple videos of me actually, but if you want something else talking, you can go somewhere else. No, it's got a lot of nice forms, connections to a bunch of information from Kansas Legal Services, community service organizations, Kansas Judicial Council, so you've got all the forms you might need. It's got information about how to get to district court, stuff like that too, like really useful, fundamental information.
Thank you.
What? Go ahead. Yeah. I just want to see the other members of DAB, comments or questions on this, seek clarification.
To the point of a fellow DAB board members about contacting a landlord that does not live here, what happens if they just don't respond at all?
If they don't respond at all, I don't know if it would be called a default judgment, but usually if someone doesn't respond in an administrative or judicial process, then judgment is taken against them for not responding. And the same is true at administrative fines, like if you don't pay your traffic ticket, you're guilty. Basically, you have that. What's that?
Is it possible to maybe add that or clarify?
Oh, I can, but I mean, that's how it's set up for sure. If the landlord doesn't respond and we determine, if the law department, whoever's investigating determines that there is sufficient cause, and then there's no response, that's what it, yeah, that's basically what it would mean. What would have to happen under this is then the tenant would file their claim in municipal court, and then the landlord wouldn't respond. That's when the fine is instituted. So if there's no response at all, that process will just go through and a fine will be instituted.
Thank you.
But then in that case, then that out-of-state landlord might not give a crap about $1,000 and then not repair anything, or that'd be my concern.
Yeah,
there.
sure. In the fine balance, yeah, that question for sure.
Right. Other questions or comments, clarifications from DAB members? Chance for members of the public. Yes.
So I have several comments, and they're gonna be all over the place. I appreciate it.
Oh, that's what I had a notepad for you.
So I didn't get the sense that this was really written through the lens of the imbalance of power between a landlord and a tenant. So much of this, I would encourage folks to really focus on that, right? Particularly now in this time when there's such a shortage of housing. All of the power, in my view, could possibly be with the landlord, right? If I think of evictions, and I'm, as a homeowner, I'm kind of naive about renting things, but I don't know if somebody is evicted here in Wichita, is that a strike, like on their credit and so forth, and then it makes it harder for them to, okay. So makes it harder for them to rent in the future, right? Okay. So on that point, if someone is evicted and they go through this process and the landlord did it, inappropriately, then I would like something to be on there that eviction notice is wiped from their record. And I don't know if that's something that goes in the ordinance. That's one point. If they're evicted, and depending on the lease agreement, are they going to lose their deposit? And here again, if the landlord did something wrong, or this is retaliatory, then maybe that tenant should have their deposit. But number one thing about eviction, it's almost like it's too late. This process sounds like it could take some time. And I know you're developing it, so I would encourage you to kind of come up with something that's kind of emergent, right? To help folks so that they're not evicted while this gets sorted out. I'll echo what some of the others have said. I feel like these fines, particularly in a time when it's so easy to get other renters, it'd be much easier just to, pay the fine and move on, and then get somebody else in who's going to pay more money. The communication piece, I appreciate that there's a real focus right now. We want to get the word out, but this has to be, in my view, ongoing forever. New folks are going to be coming in, new folks are going to be tenants. This can't be a one and done. And if it goes into a handbook that everybody gets, and I don't know if everybody gets it, well, regardless, the handbook, I guess I would encourage it to be, you share it with other folks to proofread and kind of give their thoughts and feedback versus something just kind of written at the city or law department level. I've read some of those things, and anybody can usually find things, well, gosh, I don't understand it and I'm relatively smart. how are other folks who are perhaps less sophisticated going to understand it? This eviction resolution program. I understand, I think you said it's relatively new, but maybe data from that. I don't know how many, suits or so forth have been brought up, but that might be helpful. And as you consider the need of this ordinance, the problem, I suspect, is the problem might be greater than what we know just by what has come up locally. I hope that's not the case. Let's see what here, ongoing. So I guess that's most of my comments.
Good.
And your response?
Okay, I was gonna, we can't strike state judgments. Those are district court judgments and the city can't really like vacate those.
No,
So that's
I'm not
something that
saying that. I'm just,
I was trying to go through, yeah.
oh, okay, I'm sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, for sure. So understand that I understand the balance as well. I've done eviction defense for a couple of years at Kansas Legal Services. So I understand kind of the issue that you're talking about. We also have to consider, and I know I've said this a lot, how our ordinance fits with state law.
Right.
So when a district court enters an eviction judgment, it does stay on someone's record. And unless you get that judgment overturned or something, it will stay, again, on your record for as long as the landlord or other credit agency wants to consider it as a potential issue. But as a city, we can't say state court judgments are overturned, even on the basis of something like a retaliatory eviction. But through this process, if some sort of determination is made, kind of like we talked about in a different sort of situation before, you can potentially use kind of the decision in the municipal court case to maybe support your claim later against maybe the eviction that happened improperly or something like that as well, to try to address that. So we can't, in our laws specifically, try to contradict state law at the city level, but we're trying to at least provide some processes that get at the problem a little bit. Totally understand on the fine level, that's been a bit, like I said, it's been a big consideration on our end as well. And also understand that a lot of times maybe the timing doesn't work out great, especially with how evictions happen. Non-payment of rent happens after a 3-day notice, and you can get court papers about a week afterward, and then maybe you're evicted about 2 weeks after that. So it definitely happens incredibly quickly, but we think maybe providing tools will provide at least a better balance that exists now, is the idea behind the ordinance. It doesn't get at the full problem of anything really in the landlord-tenant relationship, or even necessarily retaliatory evictions like some of the other instances that we brought up here, but just trying to get at it some and provide some tools to tenants while balancing with state law and important interests of landlords as well. Did I miss any of them? Sorry.
Again, maybe not, but I just, the burden is on the weakest person here, and that just is tough. And I don't know if there's a way you can get around that and not go contrary with the state law. I did remember my other point, and that had to do with increasing rent because of repairs, and I read that and I thought, well, yeah, a landlord could make that case, but if it's been neglect over the years, they should have been maintaining the property all along, and then all of a sudden, I make the complaint, they increased my rent to recover all of the money they had to put into it, when it shouldn't be my whole financial burden, right? If they had been maintaining their property all along, then, I don't know, that just felt a little unfair, but this whole rent increase thing, it's cloudy and mucky anyway, so I
A lot
don't
of times
know.
it'll depend on the specific lease agreement too, which is why it's kind of hard to answer. The lease oftentimes sets out what are legitimate increases and whether there's a sufficient basis for that, how much you can increase year to year, things like that. So it really does kind of depend. So then you're not even necessarily considering the state law implications, but kind of the contractual sort of things and what the parties agreed to. So there's that whole layer. These are not really usually easy situations because of all of the legal considerations, but it's also like very personal and factual at the same time too. So that the lease is something we need to consider in those situations as well. But frankly, we copied the language again from state law because we can't quite contradict the power that the landlord has under state law, but that's kind of why we, framed it that way. But totally understand, the situation too.
I just want to encourage members of the DAB, anything that you can do to put some teeth in this, because this sounds like it can just gum somebody to death and someone's just gonna give up. The folks that need your help and need help from this ordinance the most, man, this just feels like it's set up against them, and I could work my way through it, but I'm not gonna, I don't know. I guess I could get evicted if somebody wasn't taking care of the property, but just, I don't know, hold strong. Thank you.
I do think the recommendation though, again, when I go back to it of like the language, the legal jargon is what makes it confusing for a lot of folks to understand what grounds they have, what even the process looks like. And so I think the recommendation of, is there an opportunity to work with or to review some of the language being utilized in the tenant landlord handbook that I believe you mentioned is being revised right now, that will probably include this if it passes. Again, is that something that can be done or considered to work with individuals to ensure that the language is digestible to the average person?
Yes, we'll try to write the landlord tenant handbook in a way that's accessible to folks, and that's what we've been trying to write that up to. Yes, but yes, including this ordinance piece as well, for sure.
Layman terms versus
No,
law.
totally understand. There's a difference between the handbook and writing the ordinance. Like the ordinance language usually is kind of legal jargon because it's the law or whatever. But yes, the handbook is not tracking just legal jargon. It's trying to explain things to folks as well. But definitely look it over again, and especially this one, this part, if we add it, to try to be clearer on it for sure too. And give it we haven't I don't think published any of them yet, so give it another read in that light as well.
But he's asking that, he gets to read it, or I get to read it, and you take input from outsiders.
Okay, and I'll check kind of on that as well and see if we can try to share that with everybody too. Check with
Sure, the average people can review this. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you get a committee?
Yeah.
And we've worked on other city documents, and we helped put it in layman's term. And so when the product was finished, it was easily understood. And so I think if you could get some community partners on that piece, just to rewrite, I think that would go a long way.
Sounds good.
Not to just rewrite the ordinance, but more of the community organizations that could be a part of the communications department's plans. Which I don't know if it is possible also, that little recommendation with the community organization involvement for the retaliation, but I would think to consider that. But it sounds like, I don't want to, I know we're just giving recommendations, but before you got here, one of the first things that I brought up was the idea that this is really about individuals. And the difference of, I can sympathize with the landlord getting messed up with some red tape and dispute with a single tenant over, non-payment or a broken light. But no, we're talking about habitual abuse, mold, terrible conditions, that is the fault of the landlord being negligent, which most likely they're negligent under their contract, but even so that the tenant doesn't know. The teeth point, the habitual needs to have way more fine.
But if I just bought a home and I'm gonna rent it out, I need to be taught a lesson from where to say go. You cannot be a slumlord, LaWanda. And so I need to be trained as well to break a habit before it starts.
Right, I'm not saying to get rid of the lowest fine, I'm not saying that at all, and that is probably a great example of, the someone that's getting their first property and is not able to figure out something with mediation, I get that. But we're talking about folks who own hundreds of units. And affecting hundreds of our individuals in the city. And if they're out of state, it's gonna be harder for them to defend against multiple complaints. And that goes to the point. And maybe I would hope the other result is, I don't know if you have any thoughts, or is there any need under state law or in doing a local ordinance about when there is not a contractual agreement, it's just a verbal agreement between the
That's
tenant?
still a lease, rental agreements are just anything where there is, you don't even actually need a verbal agreement if you're paying rent on a regular basis and in a property, it becomes an agreement. state level fill it that in.
Yeah, I would say,
basically,
yeah,
at the
hopefully
end of
this
the day.
thing incentivizes folks to have really good contracts and understandings between their tenants. Yeah, I'm
But
sorry.
you know, this is another thing that all of us, I think we think about it. Not that many people understand the contract they sign for their insurance. People just don't understand these real estate contracts. And we're back to the thing that you were talking about. We need education. And I have just wondered if the city, well, in one instance, you could have little flyers instead of the handbook. I know the landlords that I know, including my husband, get a handbook, but not, there's nothing really for the other side. Just hand them this thing and say, that says, this is what your rights are. I'll go ahead and hand this to you. You have these rights to do this. I appreciate it if you call me before you do it. But if you might let us know if there's some way we could help to look at educating our city dwellers a little better to
Yeah, yeah.
protect themselves in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. And I think part of the plan is to use kind of district advisory boards and people and kind of take the recommendation to look at the handbook specifically with you all too. And it's not, housing department publishes it, so I don't mean to say like I need to always talk with somebody else, but that's who I'll check with to kind of look at our review process there. And yeah, that will be honestly a big part of when we get some of these pieces, or if we get them finalized, going back through DABs, other community organizations to try to promote that. And I mean, I've worked with a few of them even while at the city trying to do sort of eviction related information and training and presentations and stuff like that. So we have a list of folks we work with, and that really is always it is always the issue, is educating people. So definitely understand, and we'll try to utilize all of our resources. And you will include. Thank you.
Yes, I have a question. Just for my own and maybe somebody else's edification. In the reality in which we live, what is like the reality or liability or the possibility of something of a stay put provision through a mediated proceeding or something like that? Because like a lot of
Like to
people.
stay on eviction or to stop eviction or something.
Like a lot of people have said, you know, a lot of times, by the time you get the notice, like it's over and it's too late. And whether that landlord is fined or not in the end, ultimately that person has to go find somewhere else to live.
I will note, retaliatory eviction or retaliation is a defense to eviction at least. And I know that gets kind of to the education and whether people are able to utilize those rights effectively or have an opportunity to. But retaliation is a defense to eviction if it can be established by the tenant, at least. So the fines might be like sort of afterward if someone wanted to do it that way, but also understanding a lot of times it does happen where someone maybe is evicted before they can even piece that information together. We just can't really at the city level stop a state eviction, like court eviction, and really halt that process. But I'll keep trying to look into it as best I can, but that's really the big wall we keep kind of running into at the city level, for sure. Yeah. And that situation exactly.
Thank you for all your patience.
Oh, sure, no, and appreciate all the comments for sure, yeah.
I'm curious, piggyback on something Joseph said, with this coming up December 19th, are you going to all the other DABs or
Not me, but there's two other tonight, we have somebody
Okay.
at both of those. And that was really the push at the last council meeting, talk to every DAB, all of the folks at those, and I'm just gonna put some sort of report together and share that with everybody from here.
Right, because I get the exigency of wanting to provide this process and more streamlined pipeline outside of suing, which most of these tenants won't know about, won't be able to afford. But I also get that we have multiple times at the city level, when dealing with things from short-term rentals, ethics, et cetera, there has been red flags around pushing through a process, even if it ultimately passes, it may take different forms and updates and revisions, and seeing that this being pushed, this is the first time we're talking about it tonight, and then it's gonna come up for vote. And I don't know if it's like because I obviously agree with the sentiment of doing that, but I also see an argument that some are maybe would want to put it up to vote before there's a new council in place. That's my gut read on that as well.
Yeah. Well, and just for what it's worth, the recommendation at the last council meeting, was to just talk to all of the DABs in the month till the next meeting at December 19th, and that was approved by the full council. So that's just the charge that we got to come here and consider that, just whatever context I can provide there.
Are there any other questions or comments from the DAB members? I just want to give another chance for members of the public, so we're just giving input on this. Anyone online? Thank you so much for all your patience and time.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, so we are actually, with council member here, especially if there were individuals it sounded like who were interested in hearing from council member before we get into our zoning cases. We want to go back to, without objection, item agenda number 8, council member updates. All right.
Cool. I don't have a lot of updates. The item that you all heard was probably my biggest update. That's coming up before the council December 19th. I didn't hear all of the conversations. I was at an event prior. But if there's any specific questions about that or anything coming up, I know that I've received some emails about the FOP contract tomorrow. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you all have any, or further talk about this eviction ordinance if you have questions about that and what's coming after the eviction ordinance.
So the FOP contract, it's coming up, I mean, what, the renewal of it, or just, I don't know what part of that FOP is coming up tomorrow.
So specifically, the contract was reopened. It's a current 3-year contract. We reopened it to talk about bonuses. As well as this additional $5,000 bonus, but looking at increasing salaries to help with retention, we're down over 100 officers. So we all agreed to reopen the contract to specifically talk about that. Negotiations for the 25, 26, and 27 contract will start sometime next year.
So the whole FOP contract's not open.
Right, there's only specific provisions in the current contract that we're talking about, and that's what will be voted on tomorrow.
Thank you.
I'll go back to DAB. Yes.
Just out of curiosity, does this, the amendment to the how to the ordinance, does that take 4 or 5 votes?
Which one?
The one on retaliatory eviction.
Simple majority, 4 votes.
Okay.
It's not a charter ordinance. Charter ordinance, I think, take 5 votes.
Right.
Anyone online? Public DAB. Back to the DAB. Questions, comments?
So, I know you said you've received some emails probably already. So the concern that I've been hearing, you know, people know I sit on DAB, is that giving a bonus prior to any real meat behind the Jensen Hughes report. And so the citizens that have reached out to me, they said it seems imbalanced to give is it $5,000 per employee?
Yep.
Yeah, per employee prior to getting some resolution from the texting scandal and all those other things that have happened. And then the city paid for the Jensen Hughes report to find out, you know, what are our deficiencies and how can we make those things better. And we really haven't got any resolution on that report that the city paid for just yet. But we're going to give bonuses before we fix any of the issues. And so there are some concerns in the community about that process tomorrow. And so what I've been hearing is, again, another postponement of the bonuses. And again, I believe people should get what they're worth. So if they deserve a bonus, then they should get the bonus. But we need to make sure that we've addressed these issues that have been plaguing our community for the last, who knows how long, but we know that Jensen Hughes really pointed out some real pointed things that really need to be fixed. And throwing money at a culture issue may not be the answer. And I know we are down officers, but again, maybe it's the culture and not the pay, but it could be a combination of both. But again, we haven't seen any real traction. And when you go to the dashboard, talking about the changes that have been made, it's superficial changes that have been made, nothing real solid, you know, that you put your teeth into and say, okay, that won't happen again. So those are the concerns that I've had that I wanted to make sure that I bring to you before the vote tomorrow.
Yeah, so I would encourage everyone who has said that to actually read the agenda report and to go back to the November 21st meeting. So as a council, we actually said we wanted to defer the non-committal $5,000 bonuses to work with not only having that, but also some contractual obligations, which is what's up tomorrow. So there are parts of the Jensen Hughes recommendations that have been agreed upon by FOP, the city, and hopefully the council tomorrow that will address one of the main things, which was the book, which is basically what allows officers to review all the information before giving their official report. That's in the new contract that we are voting on tomorrow, or the amended contract. Everything else in Jensen Hughes was either a combination of policy or what would be negotiated for 25, 26, or 27. Again, we're opening up a contract that was already agreed upon in 2020. And so we're just focusing on a couple of things. We're not going to get everything that was recommended out of Jensen Hughes in that. And I don't think the community ultimately would want just a 1-year commitment because it's just 24. And then you have, again, next year negotiating 25, 26, and 27. So anyone who is concerned about not having those commitments for 1 year should continue to use their voice as we actually negotiate 25, 26, and 27. But also in 24 is a few Jensen Hughes recommendations that will be voted upon. So again, that book is one of those. Yes, we looked at salaries, we looked at bonuses because we want to stop losing officers. We're at over 108 right now. We want to show our recruits that this is a department where we actually will care about our officers and invest in our officers. But again, that negotiation for everything else is the next contract and not this current one. And if folks go back to that meeting, you'll hear us talk about, well, we don't just want to do bonuses. We also want to do some form of contractual obligations. We knew internally that 24 was being discussed. We typically do not talk about what the union is talking to the city about. We try to stay out of that, which is why I haven't publicly said a whole lot outside of, I just want to see everything together. But we've known that the groundwork has been set for 25, 26, and 27, not only for bonuses, but Jensen Hughes commitments and making sure that we honor that. There is no conversation. I know it was in the media about a new council. We just wanted to show early on where we could start recruiting in 24 that this is what we're committed to going forward. But every other concern, I've received emails about Article 13 and 14. All of that stuff will be talked about in a new contract for 3 years. We want to make sure that if we commit to something with our police department, it's not just a 12-month thing, but it's a long-term commitment and we can see those changes.
I get that, but what if something happens in the year that directly conflicts something that Jensen Hughes talked about? But I'm just, yeah.
No, I get that. That's always a risk. We won't get everything the exact way we want immediately. That's part of the conversation going forward. There's some give and take on the city side as well as the union. The council does not participate in that. City administration does. So they kind of know where we are right now. New council will have to be brought up to board to Jensen Hughes and all of that. I think some of them know about it, maybe not in depth. And then we'll go from there and see where the council stands as far as making sure all of that's implemented. But right now, I think the key point is that we opened a contract that I will personally acknowledge. I know folks wanted to see some differences in. We weren't going to amend that contract completely to what everybody wanted. Again, we were looking at showing appreciation to the officers we have, working out some benefits for future officers, and then laying that groundwork for, again, 25, 26, and 27.
So from my days at Sedgwick County, when we did bonuses and salary increases, did we do a salary can't think of the terminology, but if we compare salaries with other like departments in other cities to make sure that maybe this
I wouldn't
5,000,
say-
maybe 5,000. I mean, have we done a
So FOP has done a great job of showing what different municipalities are offering versus Wichita. There are several municipalities in the state of Kansas that pay more than Wichita. There's way more municipalities outside of the state of Kansas that pay more than Wichita. We've lost officers to other states. We're losing officers to other municipalities. Not to name other cities too much, but Mays, Derby, Johnson County, all are paying better than us.
well, those districts are high rent as
Well,
well.
There's more pay, but also less work. And so when you get highly trained like our officers are in Wichita, those departments want them. So what FOP did was show that there is a disparity. And personally, more so than any other council member as a chair of C-Post, I know there's a disparity. We have to pay a wage high enough to keep our officers. But the thing I've always said is it's the culture. So if we have a culture that is good enough to keep officers, we'll keep them, even if the pay isn't as high as other places. But we have to work internally on that. I think that's one of the things that's been missed in all of this. Because publicly, there's been this whole, are you for police or against police? And it's really looking at our officers versus the other departments. Do we pay enough? And again, is our culture there a space where we'll recruit? And officers hadn't been recruited for a while. I've heard from a lot of officers now that they're starting to turn the tide and recommending people come in and try to recruit from there. But that's been the challenge. I think that's going to be the challenge going forward. I think the steps we're taking helps, but I've said to FOP personally and other officers, I know it's a cultural thing. It's not just Jensen Hughes. It's a lot of other things internally that need to be worked on. And Chief Sullivan's been doing that. He's been taking those steps. But there's a lot more work to do, and it's going to take all of that to change our department.
And I've met with and worked with members of the FOP, so having to sit down with them is not like, you're working with the boogeyman. So I can say that I have worked with leadership. So one last question. So just so everybody is aware, what is the price tag of the $5,000?
It's over $3 million.
Right, and that's just like a one-time, and then they're also getting a 12%,
13%
13%.
pay increase. But again, that's 24. They still have to negotiate 25, 26, and 27.
Right.
It
But that
may
may be
be,
voted on tomorrow.
yes. It may be similar, but I think even more importantly, outside of just public safety, we have employees in every department that could use better pay. We're understaffed and we need more help. And part of the challenge going forward outside of law enforcement is most of us feel a recession is on the way. So as we all talk about, everybody needs more pay. What's gonna happen if revenues drop and we have to cut? Where are those cuts gonna come? And again, I think everybody deserves to be paid for what they work. But at the same time, most of our general fund is salaries. So the only thing we really have to cut is people. And that's why I've continued to say we have to decide as a city what type of government we want. There are those who are against big government in the sense of dollars. Most of those dollars are going to be people and what that service provides. If we want smaller government, fine, but what are we willing to cut? I have people complaining to me every day about street sweeping being cut from 4 times a year to 1 time a year. I have people complaining about dead trees not being cut down. I have people complaining about parks not having their grass cut in a timely manner, tree limbs on the street. All of these things are services that we provide as a city. And if we are not willing to pay for it, whether that's property taxes or other ways, then we have to decide as a community what we're okay with cutting. And that's always hard. When I got elected, we had to cut $7 million, which thinking about what we were considering at $16 million is nothing. But we have to decide what we want and how we prioritize. Either way, there's going to be cuts. If we prioritize those services, that means we need to hire people. We need to be better responsive. We need more equipment to do things. Or if we say we're okay with not having that as quickly and as often, then we have to decide as a community what cuts we're okay with. But those are decisions we have to make coming forward. And ultimately, any service people need to be paid. And as government competes with private sector sometimes can bump those salaries up. You can work at McDonald's and make like $18 an hour. You may not make that as a city. I think our transit drivers start less than that. and we need transit drivers. So at some point, you know, that competition comes up, what are we as taxpayers okay with? Are we okay paying those higher salaries? Or are we gonna say people make too much? And that's honestly a conversation for everyone else. My opinion in that really doesn't matter. As a public, we have to have that discussion. I think we should be intentional about it. And I think we should be vocal about it, because if not, you will get cuts. If we don't hear anything, we will cut. If I don't think something's important to you because I haven't heard about it, it's cut. I'll tell the city manager, I haven't heard anything about that, so it's okay. So again, we all have to have that conversation, and we're gonna need to have it starting next year. We're gonna start talking about 24's budget immediately, especially with this new council, because they're getting elected into something I was elected in. And for the next 2 years, my last 2 years in office, I'm gonna keep saying, we have to talk about that, because if not, we'll get the government that we didn't speak about. And some of us may like it and some of us may not.
So for the record, I do believe people should get paid what they're worth. Absolutely. And I definitely want transportation workers, our bus drivers to get more money, because that second shift is on the line. We got to get these people hired. So yes.
Some good news on that. We are back up to 60 drivers. Last time I talked about it, I think we were at 48. So we're at 60. I think we need 3 more before we can start truly entertaining second shift. We'll need another 12 for that, but we are making some progress.
I like how you clarified the ongoing discussion each year and after the report comes out. I could see, because I've watched most of that council meeting and then I saw Chief's comments as well. I could see there being, it's a matter of confusion as well. And as you mentioned, the council is outside of a lot of those negotiations, but I can, especially considering each of these years is really vetted. As more information comes out and there's an interest in doing certain reforms, I could see if there was a misunderstanding, especially communication lost at a certain point between the city and the FOP, that short term, what was understood as good faith, right? And it sounded like, and that it could just be that the rank and file was not informed, was not correctly informed, that there was a miscommunication in negotiations with the city manager and staff. But it does seem then that FOP could even argue that because we're going through that review process in the following years, then we thought the good faith was a recognition separate from that for the $5,000 that was committed for this year. And that, I know that's why you're bringing it back up tomorrow, but do you feel like there's just maybe from the city to the council and from the city to the FOP, it seemed like there's just 2 completely different conversations or what was understood with the $5,000 bonus, particularly happening before the end of the year?
No, I feel like there were competing interests in it, and I can't speak for every council member. I'll just speak for me. I have continually said I want to see everything together. I think we should show appreciation for our officers, but the community made it very known to us that Jensen Hughes was important as well. And tomorrow's item, I think, actually touches that. You'll get your bonus without the attachments that FOP wanted, as well as a contract for 24 with Jensen Hughes recommendations in it. They're one item and not separate, but you kind of get all of that to me as a compromise. Every council member, I think, has been saying something different. And without naming names, I've watched how some react to some of the commentary from the public versus how they feel about FOP. Some are very much, we don't need any of that. We think everything is great. Some of us realize that while we have great officers, there are some things we need to change culturally. I think all of that was going around, and this process was maybe negotiated a little different because you had some council members in observing. You had other council members not, and typically between the union and the city administration, that's where the conversation happens. We see it at the council meeting, or we may have questions to the administration, but that was probably one thing that was different. I know certain council members were reached out to, and in transparency, I was one of those people throughout this to kind of see where my head was at, but I think that's where it was. And then there was an opportunity to talk to the public about it, in which we all shut up. So publicly, I didn't say anything other than I wanted to see those happen together. To get too deep into it, unions are free to say what they want, so we saw one narrative out there. But then we had some other conversations, and I think that's how we got to what's happening tomorrow, but that's really the only difference. We always have 7 members who think either similarly or different, and that conversation gets into city administration. They try to negotiate the best deal. Administration is always pretty blunt about if they know if there's support from 4 members or not. If they don't know, great conversation. If they do know, it's pretty much that won't pass. So it just depends on what's known at the time.
I guess I was more bringing up the city staff too, because to me, the shock of the breakdown in potential communication was seeing chief, not rank and file chief, not FOP publicly after the city manager said during that meeting, which was under the city manager, making those comments makes the situation seem very different than past situations.
So the way I took that, and I'm very different from most people, I think, in that. I didn't have a problem with what the chief said. I thought it was good that the chief of police had his officers' backs and let them know that he supported them and he would keep pushing in good faith for a deal that supported them. Thought it was great. I've heard officers happy about that. I think FOP was supportive of that. I didn't take offense to that. I think ultimately when we negotiate a new contract, you have your WPD administration separate from FOP and separate from city administration. The chief having their back and saying that, and he truly has. I mean, I think he's talked to all of us about what he would like to see. He's doing that. I think that's good. I think the officers appreciate it. So I didn't take it in the way that some people did. And even when he called me, I encouraged him. I said, hey, I don't have a problem with that. I'm glad that you have your officers back. I think that they needed to hear that. And, we'll work out this other stuff. When he knew where I stood, I think he knew where other council members stood. It's just working through all of that.
And then tomorrow at the council meeting, will that be a topic if there's any members of the public listening or anyone here that want to speak to it? Or will there be an opportunity for public comment during that, or will it just be?
Anybody who wants to show up and talk, you get 5 minutes. So the mayor will open up that item. You'll have a staff presentation. I'm not sure if FOP is speaking. I'm sure they'll be in the space. Whether they do or don't, we'll go out to public comment. You don't have to sign up. So if you have thoughts on it, you get 5 minutes. The mayor tends to allow you, if you don't have your thought done in 5 minutes, to complete it. So you may get 6, 7 minutes. We'll hear you out. If we have questions, we'll ask you, and then we'll vote. One thing that is important to know, though, is anyone seeking amendments to that, those amendments tend to happen at the staff level. So as a council, if we try to change what was already negotiated in good faith at the bench, whether our voters want us to or not, that means that has to then go back to FOP and city administration and be negotiated and potentially agreed upon. And if not, those checks are supposed to be paid out on December 22nd, which is why we weren't highly concerned about having it come back to council. If we were to then say, you know what, we want everything we heard to happen, and FOP then says, we're done, it doesn't happen. Officers don't get bonuses, that contract doesn't get agreed upon, and we figure it out in 2024. And again, if that's worth it to you, definitely let us know. But just so everyone knows, if you see council members seeking amendments, all of that has to then be re-agreed upon by administration and FOP. It's not we say it and that's what it is. That all has to be agreed upon.
And then at the December 19th meeting, when the retaliatory evictions come up, that'll be open for public comment as well. You don't have to sign up.
You don't have to sign up for that. As long as it's on the agenda, and if you look at our website the week before, so agenda reviews at 11. After we end the agenda review by 12 o'clock, the final agenda is normally online. So if it's still on there, that item will be up. And if you want to talk again, you'll get 5 minutes. You can let us know what you think. One point I was going to make about retaliatory landlord ordinances is step 1. It's not perfect. Nate had to go, but he would tell you, we've talked as well. We know there's work we need to do on the county level as far as eviction court. This does not help with eviction court immediately. But it's step one. We'll have that conversation with the county commission. Hopefully we see some movement. Several state reps have talked to me about this because I've been so public about it. We'll see if the legislature actually takes it up. Again, it doesn't matter if a state rep is excited and wants to push it. If leadership doesn't want it to hit the floor, it's not. And it dies at that point. Same in the Senate. So we have people who are interested. Hopefully we see it, but this is a step one. Hopefully we can get with the county and thus far the two commissioners I've talked to are supportive. But we have to get to a point where we can work through that and then see legally where they have power versus the state legislature. And then lastly is the legislature. And one of the main things that I've said before, and I'll say here, because I think this is the last meeting before our legislative agenda with the new council, is I hope that this legislature takes on out-of-state landlords. It has been a problem not only for us who've been to, well, it's out there, Emory Gardens, who has a person who lives in Dallas in a really nice house that doesn't have to deal with black mold, bed bugs, roaches, or anything else that we saw. To even now, if 259 will use this as an example, we have students going to vacant homes that are owned by property owners out of state who don't respond, so they can go in there and do what they want to. Out-of-state property owners are an issue without an in-state property manager. So all of these things will continue to be talked about. This is a step one. If you saw the workshop that we had where we outlined my wishes to see if we could remove occupancy from buildings that are deemed bad in the way, again, of terrible stuff. So not just, you know, a few boards missing, but black mold, bed bugs, roaches that can go into other units that aren't being addressed. I would love to see us be able to remove occupancy. I would love to see that property manager be responsible, because in the slumlord cases, these folks have money. One of the slumlords I'm aware of now, without giving their name, but you can probably figure it out, came up with $1 million cash to buy a building, but won't fix their property. If you got $1 million cash to buy a property, you can fix up your other ones to make sure people have decent housing. So my hope is that we get all of that on the books. I know it will be controversial, but the vast majority of good landlords and property owners won't be impacted by that. And in fact, we're looking for funds to help them. If recently I was in Atlanta, so I guess this is one update for NLC, met with a lady who works for HUD, and there are some grant opportunities for municipalities throughout the country to apply for funding up to $5 million, but actually would help folks who own their property, folks who own their home, and landlords. If you need new siding, you know, there's some lead testing tied to that, but if you need new siding, this pays for it. If you need new windows, doors, roofs, pays for it. If you need a new electrical system because it's outdated, pays for it. If you need new appliances to be energy efficient, pays for it. And that's landlord or homeowner. So, you know, if we can get into that, we're helping our landlords and property owners. There is a rent cap to that, so you can't increase rent too much, but you know, those are things that help people. We don't just want to beat up on landlords and property managers, but you know, there's some money available to really help out. And my hope is that we can get all of that implemented in the next year. So yes, there will be some government enforcement, but more than likely, if people really care about their tenants and their business model, you'll make more money with a quality product than you will with something full of roaches. Hopefully they'll see that, take advantage, get this type of help. Nothing in there that I'm aware of at the moment says you can't later sell that. Maybe you're tired of it, aged out, you're on fixed income. Let me fix it up, get as much as I can for it. I haven't seen any clauses yet that say that, but I think our community will be much better off if we can get those funds. And our goal this whole time has been not only to increase the quality of housing, but also to help the people who have housing. And again, it's the folks who own 2, 3, up to 10 properties. Most of the folks that I've run into, at least, who own more than 10 properties have enough money to fix it. Question is, will they fix it? And ultimately, without some form of regulation there, they won't. So hopefully they see us moving forward and they do it.
Ask you about that money you just talked about. In my neighborhood, there's a house that was built the same time mine was, and I have steel siding, but they have asbestos siding. he's got 5 kids. I mean, is that something they might get money for that?
So I didn't talk to them about asbestos remediation, but I'm sure there's funds for that, just like the lead remediation. This administration has been very good about trying to find monies, and former Congress has put monies into that type of stuff. That's something we can ask about for sure. Asbestos is lethal with folks. I wouldn't see why there wouldn't be funds to help out with that. The challenge would be, is there funds to get them out of the house while that happens? That
Well,
tends to
since
be. the
it's
issue.
siding, it might not be that it would go into the air while they're removing it, because it's siding.
Never know.
Exterior, true.
Yeah. I leave that to the professionals to decide, but most of the time, there are funds. The challenge with Congress is they don't talk to real people all the time, so they may have a great idea, but they don't talk to the folks on the ground that know the implementation, and it ends up being something like right now, I don't blame the Biden administration, I would blame Congress, but the funding that goes into some of the EPA remediation, there's another source, reconnecting communities, which is supposed to make up for urban renewal, destroying Black and brown communities. So there's money to relocate a highway. There's not money to invest into the
relocate
businesses.
people.
Right. So how do we support the businesses that were there, or a community that wants to start incubators? There's no money for that. So if you take Wichita, and this was the conversation I had back in March with the different departments was, well, if I want to relocate 135, where do I put it? If you go too far east, that's more neighborhood. If you go too far west, there's industrial there. Could they relocate? Maybe, but there's also homes scattered throughout that. So where do you relocate that highway? There are some cities around America where you can relocate a highway half a mile and you don't impact anybody. But in Wichita, we can't. And we know about what happened on the north end on 9th Street. There's no money to do what we actually need. But did anybody talk to real people about that? Probably not. And then in our congressional delegation, was there an effort to really try to learn what we can do to fix that? Probably not. So that's the challenge. There's a lot of money out there. It doesn't all do what we need. There's some EPA funding for some things. I looked at one funding stream that looked amazing, but most of it was just around plans. Well, we have neighborhood development plans. We've got 5 in Northeast Wichita. I think there's 2 or 3 in North Wichita. A plan does nothing if there's no money behind it to make it happen. So that's kind of the challenge with federal for sure, and sometimes state government, is they don't talk to us about what do we actually need, how's that implemented, how can we get those dollars involved.
Thomas Dowd. Gonna move on to the CUP zoning, CUP 40. Number 11.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brad Etherly. I'm a senior planner with current plans in the Wichita Sedgwick County Planning Department. We're here to talk about CUP 2023-00040. This applicant is requesting an amendment to CUP DP 195 on parcel 10. It is about 1.28 acres and is located on the west side of North Rock Road within a quarter mile north of K96 highway, specifically 3505 North Rock Road. You can see on the map there exactly where it is. The applicant is requesting to permit a car wash on parcel 10. Parcel 10 is zoned LC, but in the CUP, parcel 10 only permits a car wash if it's a single lane automatic car wash as an accessory use to a service station. And that requires an APC approval. So that's kind of the kicker, is that it's not connected to a service station. Car washes are subject to certain supplementary use regulations in the Unified Zoning Code. These regulations require conditional use if the car wash site is located within 200 feet of a residential zoning district. This proposed car wash is within 860 feet, so that's not an issue. So it would be permitted by right in the LC district if it wasn't part of the CUP that was established. The site plan does show the car wash oriented east-west on the north side of parcel 10. We've got the site plan up there. And access to the site is proposed from a shared driveway off of North Rock Road between parcel 10 and parcel 6. The stacking for the proposed car wash is at least 21 cars, which more than exceeds the minimum of 6 queuing spaces in the Unified Zoning Code. There are screening requirements for the CUP that are satisfied. However, the Wichita Landscape Ordinance also requires a landscape street yard and a parking lot screening along the arterial street of Rock Road. And the attached proposed landscape plan does indicate a landscape. The street yard does not show parking lot screening, so a revised landscape plan would be needed to be provided and would be reviewed with other construction drawings at the time of the building permit. The character of the surrounding area is commercial. There are retail stores, office restaurants, and other commercial uses. CUP EP 195 itself is surrounded on the north, west, and south. It's a mixture of LC, limited commercial, and GC, general commercial districts, developed with commercial zoning. And the property to the east is zoned LI, limited industrial district, and is an office park. The requested amendment is in conformance with comprehensive plan. The 2035 Wichita Future Growth Concept Map labels this area as new residential development. This category projects new uses to be those predominantly found in the residential category. However, pockets of major institutional and commercial uses likely will be developed within this area based on market-driven locational factors. So based upon the information available at the time the staff report was prepared, it is recommended that the request be approved, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report, and this recommendation is based on the golden rules. Up until this point, staff has received no public comments on this application, and I can stand for any questions.
Clarifying questions or comments for staff, we're turning it over to agent applicant.
Do we have
It's in that Sam's.
Well,
It's
next
right
door,
here, right.
yeah.
Yeah, we can look at the pictures. I'm fairly new, so I forget sometimes to go to the pictures. So if we look at the pictures, you know, this is looking southwest of the site. And then that's looking northeast away from the site across from Rock Road. If you'll scroll down, Tasha, we're looking southeast from the site and then looking north from the site. So that'll kind of give you an idea of what's around. I don't know if there's anything else below that. A couple of other pictures. Do you think this may be in the maybe the Planet Fitness? Fairly new Planet Fitness Best Buy area on the Rock Road.
Sam's Club.
You said we're only doing this because of
The land.
the proximity to the CUP, correct?
Just to amend the CUP to allow the car wash. Otherwise, so like I said earlier, the car wash would be approved in the LC district if it wasn't for the being attached to a service station. And we all know that the nature of car washes has changed quite a bit and they're not necessarily attached to service stations anymore. So they're looking to amend it for that reason. And I do see a couple of agents in the audience. I know Kirk, you're with the PUD that's coming up. I don't know if, are you?
The last two.
You got the last two. I don't see anybody else, so I don't.
Alright. Give a chance for agent applicant if they're here, especially if they've been waiting online.
Yep. Hi, you have John Lapointe with Brightwork Real Estate online. Thank you. We'd like to thank everybody for allowing us to participate online since I'm sitting in Tampa, Florida. Yes, we've been working really hard for the last couple of months just to try to get through this site plan. If you look at the site plan, this is a slightly complicated site with a lot of cross connection and a lot of interconnectivity. Again, to staff's point, all we really are trying to do is just a standalone car wash. They've been wonderful to work with and looking forward to hearing any comments you guys have so we can hopefully move forward.
Thanks for sticking around online. Then we got to balance staff reports and city reports with the zoning cases. I do see, I know this is more subjective probably, and a question from someone online asking why is there an interest in doing a car wash at that location, considering there's the Charlie's Car Wash on the other side of K-96, a few hundred feet away.
Yeah, I'll leave the I can tell you that the car wash business itself, I would like to say I know it, but the models that are projected and everybody these times these days really like the market, like their ability to come in and provide a service that might not be there or a different level of service. So I think it was, staff that said, the nature of car washes changed dramatically in the last, 5 to 10 years. So I think it's really about, one, providing a better service, then also the nature of what the service is now, which is a membership-based service, really also goes back to getting enough tunnels and services in the market to provide a better service to the complete area. So just having one doesn't really do well. So you're always trying to build other car washes into a certain area so you can provide better service to those customers.
Are there any questions or clarification from DAB members to the agent? Yes.
Well, to whoever can best answer this question. Going back to that other car wash that's already there. I know that everybody loves to turn left on Rock Road. It's everybody's favorite pastime. That particular stretch of Rock Road, especially around K-96, is already really difficult to drive, especially during rush hours. The car wash that exists on the other side of the highway in the summertime, the traffic that it generates has made it almost impossible to get out of or into the neighborhood that is adjacent to it from Rock Road. So, in short, my question is, what is the perceived traffic impact of putting in a car spa in a location that's already heavily inundated with traffic, like all day?
I'm not local, but I can give you our thoughts as the applicant, just because it's maybe a different thought process behind it. As a car wash, we're always looking for places that already have traffic, right? To pull traffic, not to generate traffic. So to your point, if you look at our location in front of the Sam's Club, with McDonald's next to us and a commercial node, those are the locations we're looking for where traffic is already there, multiple cross connection points to make sure we're not alleviating or causing any disruptions onto the main roadways. So for us, our location is pretty prime to where we'd like to be, because we're looking to pull the customers that are already there in their daily shopping needs. So, I think we worked really hard to maximize our stacking, to do everything we can, maintain the cross connections to alleviate those concerns. From a guy sitting in Tampa, I don't want to speak to it locally, but from afar, we've tried to do everything we can to find out where the traffic is and put it to a place that allowed us to do a good redevelopment.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments for the agent applicant before we turn it over to? All right, any members of the public comment, question? Yes.
Yeah, I do. So what's the tax revenue expected from this car wash? I mean, the fellow online already said, that's a highly desirable area, right? And I don't know, would some other retail or some other fast food generate way more tax revenue versus like a car wash? I don't know what that could be. And then I'm assuming that there's this isn't gonna qualify for the IRB or any sort of city assistance, right? That you're just wanting to change the zoning for that. Well, and the other question I'll tack it on is water. Like, water is such a really big deal. I know we have water plant, I guess, that uses city water. I just came out from Western Kansas, and water and water rights there are getting to be a bigger thing. So is it really prudent, to add even another car wash? There are so many of them right on Rock Road already. So those are just my thoughts.
I'll let the agent answer the third question, but before he does, I'll at least
answer the first two. As far as the tax base, I have no idea. That's out of my purview. You would have to talk to maybe an assessor about that. But as far as what we're asking here, you're right, it's just an amendment to the CUP, basically to withdraw the idea that this car wash has to be connected to a service station.
I would say, it was a couple of years ago when the city did bring up tax revenue in one of their presentations, and there was some blowback from that, in that if we take tax revenue as one of the deciding factors, it is not a deciding factor under the golden rules. And that would be discrimination against the property owner if we were using the tax revenue of one offset versus something else that could be there. Though at the same time, you see under the golden rules, staff will highlight if the building's being used, the facility's being used, because obviously there's gonna be generation no matter what. And that's why they often will not bring in revenue into the picture, especially if it's something that is not operating right now and bringing in revenue. But I know
appreciate
agent
your-
applicant wanted to speak to that as well.
Yeah, I appreciate your education on that, because heck, I don't know. But what about water?
As it relates, just to agree with staff, I don't know the tax implications. I'm a developer, not a tax attorney, but as it relates to the water, I think it's good to point out, again, the technology that goes into a car wash now, and to your point, the big, there is a lot on water use, a lot on, especially when you're right into the Midwest or into the Colorado areas and other areas, Arizona, where water use is really a stickler. The technology goes into that is probably at this point less or equal to the water that goes into the Carrabba's or what the IHOP or any sit down will go into that's washing their dishes constantly. So the reuse itself is up to over 50 to 55% of the water is being reused constantly. So it's pretty equal to a sit down restaurant, from a use standpoint.
I do have another comment that's reading out loud for those who don't see it, from Kathy. He's just commenting that there's another car wash in 37 just off the rock. This will be the third in that immediate area. Agree that traffic there is already difficult. Believes it'll make it harder for the neighborhood traffic. Other input from the public, questions? All right, hearing none at this point, we'll take it back to the DAB, and DAB can have further discussion.
Thank you.
And make them. DAB members, thoughts, questions?
I would like to add on to my concerns about the traffic. I do appreciate the thought of just kind of, making money off of traffic that's already there. But I am looking at the building situation as it's considered. And the entrance to the car wash is still like right at the driveway and that goes back to my point, the other car wash. In the summertime, the other car wash, it's around the block. You can only go one way. And so what happens if we end up with 20 cars just lined up on Rock Road in one lane?
Yeah, and all I can tell you is that it meets the code requirements. After that, it's kind of like, when the Starbucks gets popular and it starts to spill out into the road, we really can't, legislate after it meets the code. At that point, it becomes kind of, citizen taking care of themselves and saying, hey, maybe I need to come back later or circle the block or something like that. Because once it meets the code, and this one more than exceeds the 6Q code requirement, then we really can't go beyond that.
Okay, thank you. I would like to encourage my other staff members to consider that when they vote.
Other comments or motion?
I will share just a little further to what was said there, and that is I go to Joann's, which is another step up from here, but I just go out 36th Street. I go in and out there. I don't go up Rock Road because my patients won't act on the traffic now, so it is a real issue.
I find it really dangerous just driving through that back behind, just trying to get to Jones. But so how do the rules work? Because no neighborhoods like are probably within the distance, right? So no neighborhoods probably know that this is happening.
That's a question, if anyone.
Is that
So
right?
we have city code that requires us to notify within a certain distance.
Right.
And so that would have been applied. And so if there are no residences within that radius, then they would not have been notified. But however, there are newspapers, the newspaper notice and signs on the property as well. So there are more than just the mailed out notices, but you are correct that individual residences would not have gotten that if, I don't know the specific distance for this particular property, but it goes up to 1,000 feet. And so with the distance of a residential district, 860 feet to the west, it's possible, depending on how big the size of this property is. And obviously the size of this particular lot, small, but sometimes I've heard, I haven't experienced it yet myself, but I've heard that sometimes they take the whole CUP as the property and go out from that. So it could be as little as 200 feet. It could be as much as 1,000. This isn't my project, so I don't know exactly that distance was for this particular project, but it did follow the code for notice.
See, yes, I see that there is some residential on the west, but I guess another point of noticing, clarifying for contact would be, since the CUP is basically this commercial lot here, the other property owners that would be of interest would be the commercial owners on the lot, and all of them would have had to have been notified, including, because I could see if there was feedback from whoever owns the leases out the Kohl's or the Planet Fitness or the Sam's Club, or the McDonald's on just concern on traffic flow as well. Those would have been notified as a part of that, in addition to any residential within that range.
Well, whatever the distance requirement is. So, like I said, I'm not exactly sure what was, if it was parcel 10 was used as the requirement, because then it would probably just be 200 feet out. But if it was used as the whole CUP, which I think it might have been, not 100% sure, but I think it might have been, then it would probably be a full 1,000 feet, because the size of that CUP is so big that it would have definitely hit the 1,000 foot mark. So then you would have had not only everybody in the CUP, but everybody outside of that as well. So
Yeah, that's a good point for clarification in the future, because I would think the folks that are most affected, as you said, the only reason we're having to hear this is because of the CUP would be those within the CUP. And not having objection within the CUP.
Yes, and not just add a little context. I know we ran both the 200 and the 1,000 foot radiuses. I'm just not sure which one was used. I know in our application we submitted both.
And John, yeah, this is Darcy. I work with John. 1,000 foot radius was submitted to the city as part of this.
Additional questions, comments, motion from Devin? We have a member who lives in that area that he usually like sometimes defer to them as well.
I'd like to make a motion to deny.
There is a motion put forward to deny. Is there a second? There is a motion put forward to deny. Is there a second? Hearing no second, the motion to deny doesn't stand. Additional comment, questions, or another motion?
Can we clarify and thoroughly reiterate that we're just talking about addressing the issue of a car wash must be attached to a service station, is that the only question we're really answering right now? Not the question of whether that,
That's correct. So if a service station went in, they could put in a single drive-through car.
before.
Yeah, this is just,
It would have been a single lane like the Indian Gators. It wouldn't be like Charlie's. I'm sure this is gonna be like Charlie's.
yes, but those also are single lanes. So it's really just a matter of being attached to a service station. That's what it kind of boils down to.
Is there any additional questions? Or is there interest to do a motion amendments or anything like that? We're gonna take a vote on it. Yes. All right, since we had a
It's a
motion
shame we-
I put out that didn't get a second, we just gotta get a vote on this. I will make a motion to approve with all of staff recommendations, including the updated land, requiring the updated landscape. For a second. What happens in this situation? If there wasn't, this is mean, what happens in that?
In prior situations, you can make basically a motion, to not make a motion, or something along that line too.
I get we've deferred.
I know that I know that I've had one other case in my short 3 months that the one dad had a similar situation where someone voted for a motion to deny, and then that didn't go, and then the motion to approve didn't go, and so they just left it as a.
I just want to clarify, right, what that would be, so that when it does go to council, we have checked the right talks, whether that's like, because if we say a motion to abstain, usually abstain for certain, personal reasons. I mean, and we're not deferring in this case, I don't feel.
And I'm not the expert on this. I don't know Robert
Have you
rules
seen that
to the NC degree, but.
So if it's anything like council, if your motion that you have not declared as chair yet, that has not died yet, does not get a second, then an approval and a denial would have died. You can table indefinitely, defer to another meeting, or potentially refer back to MAPC, or has this been the MAPC?
I don't believe it's up to yet.
So you could potentially, I think this has only happened one time, say you want to hear it after MAPC. It's not a guarantee because per process, it will go to council after MAPC, no matter what. You could try to have it come back or potentially call a special meeting. But if you do not get a second, then you are left with tabling, deferring, or trying to have it come back after MAPC.
So we understand if I don't get a second, that motion dies as well. If we table indefinitely, does that change when it comes to council, the voting requirement at all?
It's a great question. I've never had that.
Okay, all right.
is there any kind of a traffic analyst that it could be referred to? I
All
know-
of that will probably come back here after MAPC, and because each of our districts have demands on the traffic counters that we have, it's not likely it will come back anytime soon. And even if I push for it being priority, I push for a bunch of stuff being priority, so that wouldn't
Probably not.
jump over everything else.
Biggest priority.
Well, it's not that, it's just I always ask for stuff, so.
All right, thanks for clarification. Sorry, I had to try to figure out how best then to handle. Without there being a second, then my motion fails to approve the staff recommendations. So then I will make a motion table indefinitely.
Second.
What was your motion?
To table indefinitely. And there is a second on that. Which is weird because I personally, like, if I make that motion,
Yeah,
But the applicant, can I just ask a question? I'm just trying to understand the process. On if that was to happen, how does that affect anything moving forward? I'm just trying to understand here.
That's what we
how
were
this-
trying to we haven't had this situation happen before. We use as well. So we had that denied second and a motion to approve didn't get a second. And so council member just said he's not, because sometimes when there's a disagreement between the Metro Planning and the DAB, it requires a higher vote threshold in the city council when it comes up to them. But in this case, we do not know.
Or we defer until the other department.
We could do that.
Yeah.
Not guaranteed that it comes back.
It's not
I mean,
guaranteed.
as it relates, and I don't know the process, and I apologize of Wichita. But if the process is, if we're speaking just tonight, regardless of the site plan and stacking and everything else, about just detached or attached car wash, if everybody's okay with that, doesn't the process moving forward, whether that's to board or after the CUP, the site plan, the engineering, would address any other major layouts or traffic issues? I'd hate to lose on step one. Because if you could pull up the site plan again, there's just so many constraints on the redevelopment of this site. So every access point is fixed by, by agreement, whether that's Sam's or McDonald's. Every access point has to be open. There's a large stormwater easement that cuts across the site that prohibits building placement in a bunch of locations. And I would agree with staff. I mean, that's why we have 21 stacking spaces, as it relates to traffic. Standard membership base, if I see 22 people in line waiting in line for a car wash that I could use anytime, any day, I just drive around. And to your point on where's the hammer, if we stack into that driveway into the street, most people don't have it, but there's a huge hammer right next to a Sam's/Walmart. You block their driveway, they will come beat us like you've never seen anybody get beat. So I'm just wondering if there's anything out there that will allow us to just move forward on that versus the site planning side of things, because I think that's where we're hung up.
The challenge you face is there's already a motion to deny that failed, and there was already a motion to approve that failed. So now DAP has to go a different route. And to your comments about traffic, well, I understand, again, not being here, and no offense to you, Rock Road is unique. And the Charlie's Car Wash has backed up traffic both on the highway and in the street, even though there is parking over there. So those concerns from community are legitimate, even with the Sam's parking lot there, even though Sam's may come knock on your door. The fact that traffic that was blocking a highway with law enforcement didn't stop that there, said a whole lot. So tonight, even though I think from your perspective, everything looks like if we can just agree on this procedurally, there's already been a motion to deny that failed and a motion to approve that failed. So DAB has to find a way to get something voted on. And then the next step is both MAPC, which I would encourage you to be at, and then the council meeting where there is no public comment unless we waive our policy. So the best place to make the argument for you and your client will be at MAPC prior to city council.
Okay, so I guess that's my question. It doesn't, I just don't know your process. It doesn't stop tonight.
No, this is one step.
In the sense,
Okay.
like, let's say still motion to deny had passed, you'd still go in front of the Metro Planning Board, and if they had approved, that still goes to city council. It just means it changes maybe the vote threshold. But in this case, the main thing we were asking about is we've never been in a situation where it's not approved, where the motion to approve and a motion to deny got rejected. Because if we had denied, and Metro approves, there'd be a higher vote threshold at the council level, but we're not sure what it means in terms of that. That's the only way, right, that it would change anything in the process for y'all, is that if the city legal views a motion to indefinitely defer, having approved and denied failed, is a higher threshold, voting threshold, as if we had voted to deny. That's the only difference it would be. It's still gonna process of Metro and council.
All right, just never had it happen either. So at least we got a first for everybody tonight.
Yeah, we're all there. That's asking questions as well, but I will say, in terms of meeting flow, there was a motion to defer indefinitely and a second to that, which then requires us having a vote on that.
All right.
Any further discussion on the matter?
Thank you.
Thank you. If not, we'll go ahead. Anyone in favor of a motion to indefinitely defer, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None opposed? Definitely deferred.
We
All right, well,
our-
everybody enjoy your night and happy holidays.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Appreciate
Yep.
it. And we'll
Years in and they're still.
Wow. And now we go to PUD 12.
Thank you.
Yeah, so now we're moving on to PUD 2023-00012. This applicant is requesting a zone change from B multifamily to PUD to allow commercial uses for an existing building and to allow shared parking among all lots, which are free. A duplex and two single-family residences sit on the 0.48 acres generally located within 1 block south of East Douglas Avenue and on the east side of South Kansas Avenue and the west side of South Minneapolis. So what we've got here is kind of an L-shaped situation with an alley bisecting it. The west property that is by itself is the 104 South Kansas Avenue property, and the two lots to the east are 115 and 119 South Minneapolis Avenue. There are some development standards that the applicant has proposed. Basically, parking shall be in accordance with the Unified Zoning Code. Setbacks are indicated on the plan, and if not, otherwise shall be in accordance with the UZC for the LC Limited Commercial District. Uses in parcel 1 shall be limited to those permitted by right in the LC Limited Commercial District set. Public recycling station, reverse machine, broadcast recording studio, car wash, convenience store, farmer's market, funeral home, hotel or motel, nursery or garden center, or post office substation. Those are all uses that cannot be used according to the applicant's request. However, tattoo or body piercing uses would be permitted based on their PUD language. They do request a building height of maximum 35 feet. As far as signage goes, they propose that it be in accordance with the city sign code for the GC General Commercial District. They are also proposing that no billboard, monument, portable, or offsite signs shall be permitted, and that no illuminated building signs on the south elevations of any building or the north elevation of parcel 2, which is the Kansas Avenue building on the west side, be allowed. But staff is recommending that signage instead be in accordance with the city sign code for the LC commercial district. As far as screening and landscaping goes, staff recommends the proposed PUD be required to adhere to the section 4B of the UZC regarding screening and to adhere to the Wichita Landscape Ordinance for landscaping. The applicant is requesting that if properties are developed as single family or duplex dwellings, that landscaping will not be required. The applicant also proposes that trash receptacles and ground level mechanical equipment be screened. As far as lighting goes, the applicant is proposing outdoor lighting limited to 15 feet in height, which conforms to the UZC. As far as properties surrounding the area, property to the north is zoned CBD Central Business District and is developed with commercial uses. And then north of the Kansas lot is B multifamily residential and is developed with a single family dwelling. Property to the east is zoned PUD 159 and is developed with Kansas Food Bank. Properties to the south are zoned B multifamily residential district and developed with a single family dwelling and an apartment building. And then properties to the west are zoned B multifamily residential, that would be west of the South Minneapolis. So the little island there, single family house above the Kansas. And then also west of South Kansas, the parking lot. Kind of confusing, but I hope you're tracking this. The request zone change is in partial conformance with community investment plan. A site that's designated as residential and new employment to the 2035 future growth map. Locational guidelines state that higher intensity development should be discouraged from locating in areas of existing lower intensity development, particularly established low density residential areas. And the proposed rezoning is not in
conformance with Wichita Places for People Plan. The subject site is located within the established central area. The requested zone change does not align with Plan's Strategy 6, which aims to encourage infill and redevelopment that is contextual to the environment in which it is occurring. I feel that that phrase of redevelopment that is contextual is the key phrase there, and that the context of the surrounding neighborhood is residential in nature with older single-family dwellings, and incorporating commercial uses in the established neighborhood would not be a contextual redevelopment project. Approving the request would also create an island of the residential property north of 104 South Kansas Avenue. The proposed rezoning is in conformance with the Central Northeast Area Plan. This plan calls for the support of local business development and to market potential business sites in the area. You can go to the photos. This is on South Minneapolis Avenue, looking west at the duplex that is on the right and the single family house that is on the left. The applicant is proposing to demolish the duplex. There is a structure on the back side of the lot that is apparently of some kind of commercial building. It kind of looked like a garage, but it may have been some sort of shop or something like that. They are planning to keep that structure and then put a parking lot basically where the duplex is now. And then you can see on the right-hand side, looking at the Kansas Food Bank, which is a beautiful site to behold. This is a great thing, but that's a thing to look at. But then if you go down, this is looking north from those Minneapolis Avenue sites and then looking south. If you scroll down up there, this is looking at the single family home on South Kansas Avenue, and then looking west from that subject site to the parking lot across the street, and then scroll down. We're looking south at the multifamily dwelling, and then also the parking lot for that. Beyond that is single family, and then looking north towards Douglas Avenue from the South Kansas Avenue site. I think that that's all we have for the photos. So based upon the information available at the time, staff report prepared, it is recommended from staff that the request be denied. This recommendation is based on the golden rules. We will say that staff has received 3 public comments, 2 for and 1 against. And I will state that the MAPC did recommend approval on the 12 to 19 votes. Having said that, I will be available for any questions, and the agent is also available.
Oh, I said 14, but we were on 12, and I apologize.
Okay.
And I know you went into 12. Sorry. No, it was my bad. I'm still figuring out from the last code what all was happening. Any questions on this?
Was there a specific one of the golden rules that it?
Yeah, they basically stated that the commercial use is in context with the surrounding area, considering Douglas Avenue to the point.
What is the commercial use?
Just, what do you mean?
Oh, is that?
Yeah, was there a planned business or?
I don't, I think the agent might be able to speak better to that, but basically the PUD gives a list of what can be, and it's more or less anything in the limited commercial district, except for those uses that I include, but also including the tattooing or the body piercing, which would not normally be in the LC zone.
Thank you.
Page 4 is why they, if I'm reading this right.
Unless there's additional questions for staff, then probably could get the agent applicant to speak to it and give us more information. Thank you.
Mark A. Miller, engineering, I'm the agent. To give you a little bit of history, that property in the back, right where the 2 alleys tee together, there's a building in there. It's probably owned by anybody in this room. It's been there forever, and it looks like it's probably had some commercial uses in the past, but the whole thing is zoned multifamily, high intensity multifamily, the whole neighborhood over there. So the owner of the property went in to pull a building permit to improve the the structure in the back, because they want to do some kind of commercial use. Just get it ready for, you know, whoever wants to lease it out. And they told him, no, you can't do that because you're not zoned properly, which is why we're here now trying to get zoning so you can actually do something with that parcel, with that building. The duplex in the front, he's may or may not tear that down. He's kind of leaning towards tearing it down because he doesn't think he can renovate it. He thinks it's that far gone. The other two houses to the south, the one on Kansas and the one south of that duplex, he's renovating those right now. The intent is the one on Kansas will be a single family rental. And the one on the single house on Minneapolis will be either a single family rental or kind of like a neighborhood type retail thing, because, you know, these houses aren't that big. And it, you know, somebody may want to come in with a little nail shop or a cupcake shop or something along those lines that he probably rent that property. And that would be allowed with this type of zoning. He's not gonna put in a car wash, I can tell you that. He owns the properties on Douglas except for the car lot, which is right on the corner of Minneapolis and Douglas. So he's got adjacent properties in here. He's redeveloped a lot of those on Douglas, and now he wants to come back and redevelop this. There's been some talk about issues with crime and that type of stuff in the area. So you take some of this stuff, especially these properties, you improve them, then people are going to notice they're living in that. That should help any kind of crime issues that are out there. The neighborhood, I mean, the staff comment is this neighborhood's single family and we're intruding on the single family. Well, you've got commercial right up next to it. Then on the east side of Minneapolis, you have the food bank, which goes well south of his property. So it's not neighborhood either. One of the comments from the planning commission was they view this more as a mixed use neighborhood as opposed to a single family neighborhood. And the way it's zoned right now, you know, these are older single family homes that have been there for 100 years maybe. They've been there a long time. And the way it's zoned right now with the current zoning, you could put apartments in there at 75 units per acre. So you could really jam stuff in there if you wanted to without changing any of the zoning. You know, if somebody came in and accumulated some of those lots, they could really pack some apartments in there and have a really high density residential development. They talked about the neighborhood place for people. One of the things they're concerned about there would be walking past that kind of stuff. Well, you've got buses that run on Douglas. You've got sidewalks existing right now that go back to these properties. So as far as any kind of transportation to these properties, it's readily available.
Any questions, comments to agent applicant? Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
At this point, we'll give opportunity for any members of the public who want to give an opinion, ask a question about this particular case. All right, gonna bring it back to the tab. My first initial gut was hearing the mixed use point. Reminds me of when we were dealing with the Crown Heights stuff recently. And that we get around Douglas, as Douglas develops further and becomes even more of an arterial for us, we are dealing with odd mixed use and older zoning. So I'm not pushing either way, but I'm like, that reminds me of some of the past few cases we've had where we ended up saying, yeah, Douglas is mixed use. And I especially think of the idea of what the agent applicant's proposing, and you already have all that commercial which is really shorter than a full block, just right there north of it, without much residential on the north side of it as well.
I think I had a clarifying question in that basically at the core of this, the owner wants to use a building that is already constructed for commercial use, and that was the impetus of this. And so all of these lots have to be, I guess I'm not understanding why the zoning request for all the lots. Unless we're planning for future use of cupcake shops.
Well, he owns all the properties, so this would give him an opportunity, especially if the one on Kansas to the north, if it became available and he picked that up. It would give him an opportunity to develop like those 4 lots better, you know, as one parcel. And we're tying them into one parcel. And part of it also is the parking, where you can use parking from one parcel to the next, since he owns all 3 of them. You know, if he gets a little bit of parking in the backyard of like the one to the south or something, if he needs it for that building, he'd be able to use it for that building. As opposed to trying to meet the parking requirement for this one lot, this one building.
So it does sound like then it does sound like you're looking at maybe, if I can make a comparison, it's not gonna be the exact same, but if he's wanna use these existing buildings and that's why he's doing the zoning request, not like a very mini Clifton Square in some way, just like, you know, a few boutiques and things like that. Is that what they're looking for to be able to use?
Right, and just kind of combine it all together. Plus he owns the stuff to the north and it has some parking on it also. It just lets him share parking amongst all of his properties.
And right now he can
kind of develop them all together.
He can tear them down and do multifamily on.
He can tear them down and do high density multifamily, yes.
Questions, comments? Thank you for that question.
I'll comment. Looking at the neighborhood, yeah, there are some mixed uses, but there are homes that demolishing is on the table. And if we approve this, it could still happen down the road. If there's a structure there, we found that a lot of these older buildings were built and they violated the zones. That's probably why that building is there. But it is there. And if he wants to do something with that building, I'm all for changing it just for that development if he needs something. But I'm always leery when we're talking about demolishing homes when we're in, well, I'm not gonna go there. Well, we know that there is a shortage of affordable homes in Wichita, but that's not what's on the table. If I stick to the golden rules, it goes against the nature of the community as stated by this denial. And so I'm kind of leaning towards the denial. But if we could do something with the building that's already there, I would be okay with that. If he needed to get the zone changed and properly use the building as commercial because it's already there.
We want to be on the up and up here, that if, based on what you said, you're not making that decision anyway because of demolition, because it sounded like already under current zoning and as the property owner, he can demolish those buildings. We're making a decision on.
I'm making
keeping
it,
the current
I'm
buildings.
making a decision on the golden rule that what he's proposing goes against the character of the
Okay.
neighborhood.
Just wanted to clarify.
Yes.
Because I heard you say that prior thing.
Yeah,
Wanted to
but
make sure.
that was my side note. Wichita is desperately in need of affordable homes. And that's just a side note.
Sorry, I was out of the room. These homes have been vacant for.
Yeah, I don't know, Kurt, can you speak to how long they've been vacant, if they're vacant?
I couldn't tell you.
But they are.
They are vacant now, yes. He's remodeling the 2 on the south right now.
Thoughts, questions, clarifications?
Just still really confused about this south property on Minneapolis. Like, is that being remodeled as a house or confused about why?
I'm fine if you. if-
And I apologize for being so confused. 'cause
No, 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 it's fine.
But-
There was a good question, for clarification too before. If the agent applicant will make exception, would like to speak to that, since we are dealing with multiple buildings here to help.
It's being remodeled as a house right now, yes.
And MAPC heard this already.
That's correct. They voted to approve. Well, they were-
Says denial.
that is, the staff recommendation.
Oh,
And no protest.
We haven't received any that I know of yet, but we typically don't get them until the 2-week period is complete. At least I as a planner don't receive them until that 2-week period, and that won't be until next week.
Yeah, I apologize, here, I guess there's a little confusion, mainly because if we actually seen as the vibe is that if we were talking about the one house in particular. And I think that's where the confusion was as we discussed through this, that and the agent applicant had said it's also be able to utilize for traffic flow and parking spaces and things like that, but I apologize. We usually were a little more expedient when it comes to these things, when it comes back to our discussion, but these are good questions to have, and as we figure it out, and thank you for being here to help explain. Otherwise, we've probably been really in the dark now too. Well, similar to the prior case, we do have to take a vote. We are obligated to do that, and so I will make a motion, see if there's a second. For approval, actually rejecting the staff recommendation. Approving as the MAPC did, in respect to the mixed use of the Douglas Arterial, as well as the potential use of the properties which are currently being vacant right now. And I do not believe that these zoning changes would negatively impact walkability or traffic flow as well.
I second that.
There's a second. We'll have any discussion on this, and when we have a vote, if I need to, we'll do a roll call, but we'll first try to do positive sign, voice vote. So there is a second for that, and the motion is to approve the zoning change like the MAPC did, and to not go against the staff recommendation. And there is a second. All in favor of approving the zoning change, please say aye or give a positive sign. Aye. I'm gonna ask for a roll call just to be safe. I see that you're sticking your head. Patrick.
Okay, I as in you like to approve.
The zoning change.
Can we do yes and
Make sure
no?
we all appreciate.
Yeah, we can do yes or no. Any positive sign for approving of the zoning change?
Mary Beth? Wanda?
No.
Joseph?
Yes.
Abby?
No.
Shakira?
Yes.
Yeah, let's do one positive.
Michaela?
Yes.
Yes.
3-3. 5-3, thank you, Dangus.
Thank you.
Next, we have, and I apologize for saying it before, PUD 14. Now we have PUD.
All right, me again. We are looking at PUD 2023-00014. This applicant is requesting a zone change from CBD to PUD to allow addition of temporary special events. to the CBD Central Business District uses. The city is the applicant for the Simply Two, property. These development standards that are current will not change, that will remain the same as the CBD district. Signage, applicant is proposing signage be in accordance with the city sign code. Screening and landscaping, applicant proposes screening and landscaping requirements remain current. They use these standards for CBD. Again, providing parking. Properties to the north and east are zoned CBD Central Business District and are developed with high-rise office buildings and an apartment building. Properties to the south are zoned PUD, Planned Unit Development number 19, and are developed with hotels. The property to the west across the Arkansas or Arkansas River, I think I've been told that's how you pronounce it. The zone PUD, Planned Unit Development number 61, and is developed with the city park. What they're asking for, to break it down, basically, is that whenever Century 2 has trade shows or expos, and they have people who are doing exhibits that would not normally be allowed in the CBD zone, they would like to have these temporary special uses. It's kind of a fallback to be allowed in the Century 2 complex. The popular example is if you've got a convention of tattoo artists, that they would be allowed to actually give tattoos on the grounds at that expo event. Currently, they would not be able to. So this is a situation where it's kind of a wide array of possible uses, but each time would require the city council approval of that temporary use. So they would have to take that use for the city council and get approval before it happens. The requested zone change is in conformance with the plans 2035 Wichita Future Growth Concept map. The map identifies the area to be appropriate for residential and employment mix. That category is described as areas of land that likely will be developed or redeveloped by 2035 with uses predominantly of a mixed nature. And the proposed temporary uses of the Century 2 location will be in coordination with events that are taking place on the property, typically for conventions or expos. Many of these uses would be permitted by right within the CBD Central Business District. The proposed PUD would permit any temporary uses that are not permitted by right within the CBD Central Business District, but would require approval by Wichita City Council. Proposed rezoning is in conformance with the land use compatibility location guidelines of the plan. Land use compatibility guidelines state the city should promote downtown as the region's preeminent walkable mixed use development area with a focus on office, retail, hospitality, government services, high density residential and entertainment, cultural and civic facilities and activities, allowing the Century 2 Center to incorporate temporary special events uses will increase the amount of visitors to downtown, and these visitors will then potentially explore and patronize other areas of the downtown district, including parks, retail, and entertainment venues. The proposed rezoning is in conformance with the Wichita Places for People Plan. Subject site is located within the established central area. It is also located in what the Places for People Plan calls an area of stability. Requested zone change will allow for a greater amount of uses to occur within the Century 2 complex, while also encouraging larger numbers of potential visitors to the downtown area. And lastly, the vision of the downtown master plan is that downtown is a place that enables people to live, work, shop, play, and learn, and all within a short walk of each other. Downtown is the reinvigorated part of a region committed to a vital future. The proposed PUD would help allow for the additional uses to occur at Century 2, which are currently not permitted. Those additional uses could encourage visitors and patrons to explore the downtown area. These photos, you can see, we all know what Century 2 looks like, but we'll go through them. This is looking south of the site, and then looking north away from the site. You'll scroll down, looking east away from the site. And then scroll down, It's looking south and then looking west across the Arkansas River. Based upon the information available at the time the staff report was prepared, it is recommended that the request be approved. Recommendation is based on the golden rules, and up to this point, staff has received no public comments. I can stand for any questions, and I know the agent is here as well.
It was, yeah, I was surprised when I saw this, because I just looked it up again. Because in September, when the council, a little background, if anyone on tap isn't aware, the council voted to expand where tuning is done in city limits, and this kind of spurred this conversation, where there was a tenant in Old Town who found out he was not in compliance. And then there was, as much as there was, isn't maybe that fervor or public participation tonight, there was a pretty big grassroots support swell from Old Town Association, local businesses and citizens, change the zoning. And so that already happened in September by a 7-0 vote by the council. Why I'm segueing that is, it says when that happened, and that was what I thought, and the recording says this would allow it to happen in Century 2. Why are we?
So I don't know all the patterns. That's what I've heard off of the scuttlebutt, basically, but let's throw the tattooing out of the equation then. If there's any other use that's not allowed in CBD, then I think that project was right before I started, so I apologize for that. But yeah, if there's any other use that would not be allowed in CBD, then this would just let that potentiality happen with the approval of the city council.
Formalizing the process instead of that being voted as not.
Yeah, it's basically just allowing these expo, convention, and event people to utilize Century 2 and you know, in all the ways that they can imagine. So
Additional clarifying points, comments, or questions for staff or agent applicant?
So I'm thinking this probably means that during Riverfest or something, when everything and his cousin is down there doing stuff, they probably go to the council and get special permission. Is that the
Well, it
case?
sounds like, yeah, if we approve it, each use would go in front of
Before.
council.
yeah, that's Century 2.
And
I
that's
don't
Century
know,
2, yeah.
I've just recently learned about Riverfest, but if it's, you know, all outdoors, I don't think that would apply. But if there's anything happening within Century 2.
In the building?
Yeah, that would not be typically allowed in that central business district, then they would have to go to, and maybe they come up with some new ideas, you know, based off of this, that they're like, hey, let's see if we can get this happening. But regardless, we're not really talking about Riverfest, we're just talking about the Century 2 building.
Building, not
where
the
they have-
grounds.
Yeah,
The building.
well, the grounds too, I guess
Because
technically.
Actually,
grounds
it's
is-
the entire
It's that
PUD
type
that's
of-
outlined, and Riverfest comes to council every year.
That's what I want.
It's a good example,
That was
because then they could bring it up, but it's unique in that it requires each of those uses to be approved by council.
But if we wanted to have a lot more of that type of event, then.
And they're
All
gonna have that.
special events come to council.
Yeah.
Most of them are on the consent agenda unless it's something controversial.
I guess we're basically just giving them the ability to go ask council for these things, because that's what it says, you're gonna have to go ask council.
Already go ask council.
Right, it's basically we're
Saving
approving that they can ask
council
things
things.
outside the.
If you're talking about a special event, I don't know if you have an exhibition or an expo event at Century 2, they may come to the council and ask special permission. I don't know. I don't know if the agent has.
I can answer.
Yeah, there you go.
Glad to help.
Dale,
Yeah,
just
pretty
pull
glad
the
to
guy
help.
out.
Phil Meyer with Baughman Company, agent for the applicant. So this thing does go back to your tattoo. And I didn't handle the case you talked about, but I believe that just solved the situation for that particular business. It wasn't a CBD issue, central business district. So any use that's allowed today in central business district can go on Century 2. They have had a request to do a tattoo convention. That's not allowed in CBD district today until they change the ordinance to change for the whole CBD. And sitting down with staff, and I think they're going to do that someday. I mean, in today's world, that's going to happen. But what we felt was best was to put this PUD over this, create this temporary special event. Because if it's a convention, it's not a business running 365 days a year. It's just a short term. typically 2 to 3 days on a convention, but it could be up to a week. So we felt it was best for unforeseen special events not allowed in CBD today by zoning, that this would take care of that. And we would turn it over to city council to look at each case and determine if that 3 days, or 7 days, or whatever that time frame was appropriate. Only within the confines of the property outlined in your statutes, which is the convention century 2. That'll try to answer any other questions.
Clarifying that each, I know in staff summary, it says this, was each specific end date, each temporary use would have to be approved, separate votes.
That's only if it's not allowed in central business today. So, this is rare. You may get one a year. It's not going to happen all the time. The central business district has a lot of loud uses, but we found the one
One that would.
it happens.
So this is just allowing Century Two to offer different types of events in the building.
Correct. It expands what they can do inside the building with council approval. They just can't go to it.
Any questions, DAB members, comments for agent applicant clarification? Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here. Members of the public, any comments or questions on this specific case?
I have some questions. So for clarification, so it's not just inside, it's outside. So the lawn and garden show, everything had been inside, then they would go to city council, and we have some vendors who want to have some of their stuff outside. Is that what I'm hearing this is?
So the lawn and garden shows allowed in central business district.
Right.
That's not going to have to go to city council
But
to do that.
I thought it was to bring stuff outside, like.
No.
Oh, it's only inside, but okay, maybe it's confused. I thought you were talking about two artists wanting to do things outside.
Anywhere on the grounds.
Anywhere on the grounds.
Yeah, so it could be inside or outside, but if the use is already allowed in the central business district, they do not have to apply.
Okay.
If it is something that is not allowed in the central business district, like a tattoo convention, they could have the convention, but they couldn't do any tattooing. This would allow them to do the tattoos on the premises. For sure, for as long as the convention is allowed.
So,
If they got city council.
so city council approves what the convention is.
All special events come to the city council.
And then because I just wanna, I kind of think of the state fair, there's different trailers out, like the Army has a trailer. You can go and, I don't know, pretend like you're flying a parachute or whatever. I mean, if the trailers can be outside.
If they're asking to do something that is not allowed in the central business district today, then this is the vehicle that lets them go to council and ask for permission to do it.
Okay. Yeah, my only concern is like if they approve something that, I don't know, wouldn't normally be allowed, and then all of a sudden Proud Boys comes up and parks a trailer outside and it's approved.
If Proud Boys wanted to do tattoos or another approved thing, they could.
Wow.
We don't discriminate against groups.
Any other questions?
So if you want the council not to let that happen, then you have to go address council why you don't want it to happen.
Yeah, I guess you just don't know, you don't know necessarily who all the vendors are gonna be when somebody comes into town. I mean, that's the point, right? You don't know.
That's the case for any, that's a challenge for any.
Yeah. Like the quilt ladies, there'd be some radical quilters out there.
There are, really.
The questions, comments from the public online? This seems it basically seems like a way to be streamlined and transparent on the up and up about, hey, we want to be able to do this, but then we have that backstop in real time. Because I wouldn't support the rezoning now and out. I would support it because of the fact that you have then a concerted discussion, just like you do with any special events with the city council, but it's basically the city and the district saying, hey, we would like to open us up for additional events. Just like we're saying, the city is evolving and that area is evolving and what we're using it for. So similar to that vote in September that the council did unanimously, I don't see this to be that controversial because of the fact that it does require council to have that debate. And if council approves a use that's outside the CBD and there's blowback on it and public outcry, then it is gonna be council that takes the heat for it. And then that, they'll still be able to review it in the future for another event, but then that impact and damage will be done and there will be a vote on the record. So I don't see it that controversial, so I'll go ahead, make a motion for approval with staff recommendations.
Second. Got lots of seconds.
All right. Seconds to the left.
Yeah.
Unanimous second.
All right. Did you record a second? Are we good?
Yeah.
All right, all in favor of approval, staff recommendations, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Saw Michaela's thumb go up early, so unanimous in favor of approval.
Just one clarification, we do not discuss the consent agenda unless there's an item one of us want to bring up or public interest has encouraged us to bring up. Other than that, we say yes or no to the consent agenda. So if somebody's interested in events, they should pay attention to the consent agenda of our council meetings. You can find that on wichita.gov. You go to city council, scroll down to the bottom, you'll see all of our meetings.
Similar to the tattoo convention, I bet the Eagle will scoop up an article though, if there's something good coming in, if they did. All right, we move into 61, zoning 61.
All right, so now we're discussing, zone 2023-00061. Here we have the applicant is requesting a zone change from SF5, single family residential, and LC limited commercial to LI limited industrial. This is a large area and 57.07 acres in size, generally located on the southwest corner of East 45th Street North and North Hillside Avenue. In order to have industrial development, you can have consistent zoning with the adjacent property. The zone change would permit more uses on the site compared to current zoning. It would also allow substantial changes to the minimum lot area, minimum lot width, setback requirements. Just to clarify, you can see the large piece there, but then also across the railroad tracks, you have a small section to the southeast as well. Because the property does abut residential zoning on the north, east, and west sides, it will need to provide screening and landscaping. The character of this neighborhood is industrial with the highway and arterial streets serving as buffers between the existing residential development and the proposed industrial development. Properties to the north of K254 and East 45th Street North are zoned SF5 single family residential, LC limited commercial district, and TF3 two-family residential. The LC and TF3 zone properties are located within CUP BP 283. The property zone SF5 is developed with a reserve for a single family subdivision. The property zone LC is undeveloped, and the property zone TF3 are developed with duplexes. Properties to the south are zoned GI, General Industrial District, and LI, Limited Industrial District, and are developed with an industrial complex and undeveloped respectively. The GI zone property is unincorporated, is in unincorporated Sedgwick County. Property to the east across North Hillside Avenue, zone LC, Limited Commercial District, and SF5, Single Family Residential District, and is undeveloped. And then property to the west, zone SF5, Single Family Residential, and is undeveloped. The subject site is unplatted, which would require platting before any building permits are issued. The subject site currently has access to North Hillside Avenue, which is a 4-lane arterial street with no sidewalks. Municipal services such as water, sanitary sewer, and stormwater services already exist on site. However, they may need to extend to accommodate the proposed industrial development. And Wichita Transit does not serve this site. The requested zone change is in partial conformance with the Community Investments Plan, which recommends the subject site is appropriate for agricultural or vacant, new employment, and new residential employment mix uses. Plan defines new residential employment mix as areas of land that likely will be developed or redeveloped by 2035 with uses predominantly of a mixed nature. Due to the proximity of higher intensity business uses, residential housing types within this area likely will be higher density. Due to the proximity of residential uses, employment uses likely will have limited negative impacts associated with noise, hazardous emissions, visual light, and odor. The subject site will have screening and landscaping to mitigate potential negative impacts for the undeveloped residentially zoned property to the west. It is also adjacent to land that is appropriate for industrial uses. So based on the information available at the time the staff report was prepared, it is recommended that the request be approved, subject to conditions listed in the staff report. And this recommendation is based on the golden rules. Up to this point, staff has received no public comments on this application. I can stand for any questions, and the agent is here as well.
Questions for staff? Agents.
Long night, it won't be quick.
Thank you for being here.
Phil Meyer with Baughman Company, agent for the applicant. I asked to have this picture put up again, so I think it helps explain this probably as simply as we can. We're requesting industrial use, which would be the purple color, limited industrial. The property to the south of this, the general industrial, is the heaviest zoning we have in the city of Wichita, and has the most intense uses that we develop on that. The Highway 254 has complete access control to the north. There is only one way to get access to this property. That will be off Hillside, appropriate separation between the railroad and Fifth Street. So we're really limited in access. Developing us an industrial piece, most appropriate with the access problems we have. Some single family today, the fire department's going to be opposed to that without the means of access into it once we get past 30 lots. So it's kind of a problematic piece to develop. And all I'm doing is very briefly giving you reason to support the industrial in case you're concerned about, do we want more industrial? It's probably the appropriate use this specific location. I believe in the access. With that, I'll be quiet and answer any questions you may have.
So my nephew recently built a $300,000 home in that area. And so we're putting industrial over there, and we just know here recently about contaminants from industrial organizations. So are we sure that across the street, whatever's going on over there is gonna stay over there?
From a groundwater contamination, if that's what you're.
Or what-
one
whatever
of the many
industrial,
options you're
yeah.
exploring that could happen.
Yes.
You know, there's, I'm sorry, I don't know the dimension. There's over 100 foot highway separating that from the residential to the north. There is the 2-family and commercial development separating that. So there's logical buffers built in going north from that. All I can tell you is there is local, state, and federal laws in place that would help with industrial. Just because we're going industrial doesn't mean that it's going to be manufacturing or something that can create contamination. There's a lot of industrial uses, and it could be construction companies or other businesses that don't have a possibility of contamination.
Well, I would have been remiss if I had not asked that question.
It's a fair question. It's a fair question. I'm going to use the highway buffer as the best answer to your question.
Thank you.
So based on that map, does the county, do y'all own is your?
We
client
do
own
not.
the
That
cell?
is owned by the pipeline company, I believe, that has. There's wells there right now, or not wells, there's containers for the oil That has never been annexed into Wichita. It touches the city limits of Wichita. There is a 20-acre rule on unilateral annexation, but I assume that there's, place that's just not been annexed.
I was curious with that little, yeah.
The little white piece we did across the little triangle we did next to the railroad was just trying to clean that up, so there's quarter acre of single family sitting there by itself.
Did you say the county fire is gonna be upset?
I said city of Wichita would not let us develop that property with more than 30 houses because there's only one way in and out. It's an access problem.
Okay.
Any comments, questions for agent applicant for the public? All right, thank you, sir. Any comments or questions from the public on this particular zoning case? And I'm taking it back.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. There's a second. All in favor of the motion to approve staff recommendations, say aye. All give sign. Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. Motion to adjourn. Thank you, second. All right, now Jackson. Thank you.
Did y'all pay attention? The next bad meeting is in February.
Yeah. That one, so long.